What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 42 of the Boochcast reviews Darkside of the Ring. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by the one, the only, the broke soulless ginger, Mr. Zack Scott.
What's up, dude? Yes, it's me, the broke soul ginger, Zack Scott. Generally speaking, I'm not that broke. And today we are doing Darkside of the Ring, episode 42 of none other than Buff the Stuff Bagwell.
Yes.
He is buff and he's got the stuff. Did I say that right?
He's buff, he's the stuff, and the girls just can't get enough.
That is very true.
That's his phrase. Like,
okay.
If you've seen all his videos, he always, like nowadays when he does like cameo videos and things like that, he always goes, I'm buff, I'm the stuff, and the girls just can't get enough.
Little jelly on that part. Anyways.
Yes, so ladies and gentlemen, this is an episode we have been waiting for.
We've been waiting.
Ever since we got the call, and by we I mean Buff and myself, and I'll tell that story in a minute, we thought it was going to come out during season 4. But apparently they had episodes already scheduled, as you guys know, from all the season 4 videos that have dropped here on the YouTube channel. So I was a little disappointed when it didn't come out on season 4, but I figured if it's not coming out season 4, it's definitely going to be here season 5. And surely enough, the moment has arrived. Now, before we get into this episode, before we say what we got to say, I need to take this moment to explain a few things right off the bat. So I want to address a few things so there's no misunderstandings. A lot of people ask me if I was going to be on this episode on Vice TV. And sadly, I was not. I did mention to Buff when he got the call, they were looking to people they were going to interview. I was willing to throw my hat in the ring. I was willing to appear on Darkside of the Ring on Vice TV if he needed me to. I didn't want to push the issue because it's not my episode, it's Buff's. But I did say I'm here if you need it. And just to be clear, I was not saying this because I'm a big Buff Bagwell fan or a big wrestling fan who wanted to get the spotlight or any bullshit like that. I asked because A, I worked with Buff, and B, I had stories that I could bring to this Dark Side of the Ring because there's a lot of shit Buff went through where I was in the thick of it. Like, the shit that he went through from 2021 till now, I was there for the majority of it. And also, I knew enough about his career in WCW, I could have loaned some thoughts to those things as well. So I would have been a perfect candidate in that regard. Sadly, I did not. But the stories I would have told, I'm going to bring a few to this episode. And that's why I'm saying, Zach and I are promising you on this episode, this is not only the most in-depth episode in the history of Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring. We're going to give you in-depth information you will not find on any other wrestling podcast. With all due respect to the other wrestling podcasters, some of you I know, some of you I like. I've met some of you through interactions on social media. Some of you I met when I was setting up interviews that you guys did with Buff back when I was his full-time manager. So I know you guys very well. I have none but love and respect for you guys and the respect that you showed Buff when you interviewed him. But I'm saying, the stories I got, some of them you ain't gonna hear anywhere else. And also, there's gonna be stories I tell. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. But there are two things I want to make clear about the bad stories that I tell.
Which is?
Number one, that they are the truth. Because Buff and I, our friendship has been based on a lot of things, but the one foundation is we always tell the truth. We keep it real with each other. We told the truth to each other, whether it's good or bad. There's times he's had to tell me the truth about things that I didn't want to hear. I told him the truth on some things that he didn't want to hear. But we always keep it real. That's what's made our friendship great. We've always been about the truth. And as long as we're telling the truth, we don't get upset. Number two, none of the bad stories I tell are meant to bash, trash, disrespect, or as Buff would say, dog him out in any way. We are not here to bash Buff Bagwell. We got nothing but love and respect for the man.
Absolutely.
So the stories I do tell are meant to tell the story of what he's gone through, not to bash him. So if I tell a story about Buff that's negative, it's because it relates to something that happened either in the show or something I can talk about that was negative. But it's not meant to hate on Buff. It's just meant to tell the story. That's what we're doing here. So whatever story is negative that we tell, there's no disrespect behind them, and they're the truth. So I want to make those things clear right off the bat before we get into this. Now, as I mentioned before, when we got the call for Darkside of the Ring, Buff and I were in Huntsville, Alabama, and it was the weekend of my birthday. In fact, it might have been the night of my birthday that we were driving back home because we were there for 2 nights for the Huntsville Comic-Con. That night, we're driving back. I'm driving, Buff's in the passenger seat. That's how it is when we drive. There's been a few times where Buff's done the driving, but they're rare. I was usually dead dog tired during that time for whatever reason, whether it was we were spending hours on the road or back when I worked at UPS and I just didn't have the energy to stay up. But most of the time I do the driving when we're on the road. So I'm driving, I'm making this right turn, and we're going up this long winding road, and Buff's checking his email, because that's what Buff does. He checks his email, he checks his text messages, he calls certain people that he needs to call, and that's usually what he does while we're driving. Or sometimes we're talking, and if we're not talking, he's asleep, which is fine. I don't care. Dude worked his ass off, deserves the rest. I know I'll rest when I get home. But while he's checking his email, we got an email from Tara Hughes, who is one of the producers of Darkside of the Ring. We see this. Buff makes the call because he gave a number to reach out to. She answers. It's late at night, but she still answers. And they have this long conversation about Buff being part of Darkside of the Ring and what it entails. Because one of the things they always tell you when they do Darkside of the Ring is A, that it's meant to tell your story. The fact that they've been looking up suggestions for stories all the time, because that's what Darkside of the Ring is doing. They're trying to find stories that are perfect. Buff's name has come up more than once because of the reasons you saw in the video and things he's gone through. So they knew Buff had a story to tell. Some of the stories you heard on here, Buff was telling in the car to the lady to let her know why he would be a great candidate for Darkside of the Ring. And she's on that phone going, whoa, when she heard a lot of these. I'm not going to say what they are, as I don't want to jump ahead. But one of the big stories that came out of that made it into Darkside. And it was one of those things where they knew Buff would be perfect. But one of the things they warned Buff about, and it made us laugh, because one thing you know about Buff Bagwell is this. He's an open book about his life. Anytime someone wanted to book him for a podcast, when he tells people that he charges to be on podcasts, he always says, look, for this price, you get no time limit, and you can ask him any questions you want. There's no punches pulled with Buff Bagwell. You ask him a question, he's going to answer it. He's not one of those people that's like, oh, I don't want to talk about this part of my life or that part of my life. No, he's an open book. Because they told him, look, this is Darkside of the Ring. If you want to be on Darkside of the Ring, you have to be willing to talk about the dark moments in your career. Which we laughed because we know Buff is 100% comfortable talking about that. Especially now that he's sober. You know, he's more than willing to tell his story. And he was even more comfortable about it because they knew there's a redemption story at the end. Because now he's clean and sober. So it's okay to talk about those bad moments because he comes out the other side. And that's what made it great. So we got the call for Darkside of the Ring. They were planning it, getting it ready, getting it filmed, finding the people. As I mentioned before, I wanted to throw my hat in the ring. I would have loved to go on there. Goes, my name is Vinny Bucci. I am a comedian, podcaster, wrestling announcer, and also one of the best friends of Marcus Alexander Bagwell. That's probably would have been my intro. Like they do, like, hey, my name is this person.
People are like, who the fuck are you? I'll be like, I'm a nobody.
You have met Buff.
I have.
Yes.
I have met Buff, and I remember one time we were helping him move. This was years ago. Back when whose name we will not mention. He's like, dang, Red, for a scrawny fuck, you're strong as shit. And I was like, oh, thank you, Buff. Thank you. I was like, yeah. I was like, that was the biggest compliment I ever had a day in my fucking life.
Well, I cut this story out because we did tell this story before on a previous Darkside of the Ring episode.
Yes.
I cut it out, though, because I felt it was taking up too much time already.
I understand.
But here, I'll tell it.
Oh, boy.
Was the thing Zach's talking about is Buff was moving into a house in Marietta. And his roommate, I'll just say, if you listen to the Boochcast, you've heard this before. I refer to this individual as Voldemort, because I don't like to mention his name, because I don't want to give him any free publicity. Now, people who know me and know the story, they know who Voldemort is. But if you don't know, then you don't have to look this guy up, and it kind of gives me a little bit of a protect. So I call him Voldemort because he is somebody we do not want to name, and he is somebody who can intimidate and make people uncomfortable. So Voldemort is the perfect nickname for this guy. So we were helping Buff and Voldemort move into a house. At the time, I said I don't think I'm going to be able to make it because I was picking Zach up from work. And he said, bring him. So when Zach gets in the car, I say, you want to make some extra money tonight? So we drove there to move out of the house. Now, the problem was Buff was running late because he was getting some stuff out of his parents' house, and the U-Haul truck got stuck in a roundabout.
In the roundabout.
Yes, the roundabout.
The roundabout.
Because what happened was Buff's parents' house, there's a roundabout. Like, literally it's a roundabout, and the house is in the roundabout. Like, once you get out of that driveway, you're in the roundabout.
Yeah.
So when they backed up, the U-Haul truck got stuck in the roundabout as they were backing out of the driveway. Because Buff was living with his parents at the time before he moved into this house. It was like a transition period. Because he had a breakup from a girlfriend. More on that later. So he had to move in with his parents temporarily because the house got sold. And they, splitting the money and everything like that. So Buff kind of was setting up base there, taking care of his mom and everything else. And then got this call to move into this house with Voldemort. So Voldemort reached out to me and asked me to help them move in. So I was like, all right. So we go to move in. We're waiting forever for Buff to show because I had to get the car out of the roundabout. I got to get a tow truck. Get a lot of crazy shit. So we were here longer than we thought we were going to be.
Way too fucking long.
So Buff finally pulls up with a friend of his. He comes up to me. At the time, I had not seen Buff in 2 years, and it had been 1 year since we spoke on the phone. Because the last time we spoke on the phone was when the controversial cameo video came out, where he had the busted, broken face, and he was cutting the cameo, and clearly he was out of it. But he felt compelled to make this cameo video because it was a 24-hour video, and he didn't want to disappoint the fan, also didn't want to lose the money on the cameo. So he cut this promo. It's the one where he's like, I'm Buff on this stuff, and the girls can't get enough. I'm a badass. I got a broke face. Look at me. And then he goes, this guy wants me to talk about the pandemic, going to the gym, and he's depressed because he's stuck in the house. Well, no shit, motherfucker. We're all stuck in the damn house. I need this pandemic to end, bro. I'm ready to put my girlfriend in a chokehold to end this fucking thing, and she's holding the camera. And that freaked people out because not only was Buff clearly out of it when he did this, but also because at the time he made that joke, and it was clearly a joke. It was a joke. It was a bit. He did it because he thought it was funny. I thought it was funny too because I know Buff personally. And I know Buff, when he's in front of a camera, he turns the gimmick on. Because he's all about the gimmick when he's on the camera. Because he wants to give the fans Buff Bagwell. One thing about Buff people need to understand is he genuinely loves and cares about his fans. And that's what makes me so angry when I hear fans shit on him. Because I have met so many workers in this business in the years I've worked in wrestling. I've met a lot of them. And I don't know anyone that shows more love to his fans than Marcus Alexander Bagwell. You would be hard-pressed to find any wrestler in this business that goes above and beyond for the fans more than Buff does. And let me give you a little secret. A lot of the wrestlers that you fans love, respect, you worship the ground they walk on, most of them wouldn't spit if your eyebrows were on fire.
Ricky the Diva Steamboat.
That's one. There's a few others. They wouldn't give a shit about you. I promise you, they wouldn't. So anyway, I haven't seen Buff in a long time. And like I said, the cameo video was in 2020. But the reason it was freaked out was because at the time that cameo video came out, the Chris Benoit documentary came out. So it scared a lot of people. So I called Buff. I was on a lunch break from Lowe's because I was still working at Lowe's at the time. I hadn't quit yet. So I called him and I didn't get an answer. But I left him a voicemail to call me back. I then called the girlfriend, who we'll talk about more later. She didn't answer her phone. That scared me because she always answered when I called her. Buff didn't always answer the phone. He always got back to me, but didn't always answer the phone right away at this time. Because keep in mind, this is still 2020. Finally, later that night, Buff calls me back and lets me know everything was okay. And the reason he had a broke face was because, the girl had 2 little dogs. He tripped over the dog, landed face first in the patio. And he wasn't drunk when he tripped over the dogs. Or he wasn't high or whatever he told the dogs. But he was intoxicated during the video. He admits that. And then told me, the chokehold thing. He goes, I just thought that shit was funny. And I'm like, I did too. But, some fans had me nervous or whatever. Then the Chris Benoit thing came out. So that scared a lot of people. So the timing of everything freaked people out. So at that moment, I had to call him up just to see if he's okay. He told me he was fine. So then a year later, I'm seeing him in person at this house. Gives me a hug. How you doing? So we're chatting it up. I introduced him to Zack. Now, one thing you all need to know about Zack.
No. You're not telling the story. Don't
yes,
fucking
I am.
no.
Yes, I am.
Nope.
Yes, I am.
I'm on strike.
You're not on strike.
Yes, I am.
You're going to hear this story.
Nope.
Zack?
I'm pulling on the late rule. Fuck you. No.
Zack, grow up.
No. Don't do this. Please don't.
Why not?
It's embarrassing.
I know. But I'm just going to say.
Please, no. God,
I have to.
You. No.
Because it's funny. I'm sorry.
It's not
funny.
me.
Well, it's
It's
funny to the audience.
embarrassing.
Dude, get some thick skin, bro. My
I have
point is.
I have thicker skin than you.
Really? Because you're
Yes.
not showing it.
Well, this right here's a little bit different.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Zack,
Fine.
thank you. So,
You suck.
you swallow. So anyway, Buff comes over to Zach. He says hello, shakes his hand. Now, Zach, one thing about him is Zach likes to ask very random questions. Like, if you listen to the variety shows we do, a lot of times there's random shit that comes up. Like, one time he talked about, do you like pancakes or waffles? What was your favorite breakfast cereal? Your favorite WrestleMania match of all time? Or favorite match that was the last man standing? Like, just random shit out of nowhere. Like, you're just sitting around, because Zach is one of those people that has a hard time sitting in silence.
Sorry, that's the ADHD.
And yes, so Zach sees Buff Bagwell.
And I marked out.
He marked out.
I marked out.
And the question he asked him was, what's the most painful submission to get put in?
I was just curious.
And Buff looked at me, I looked at him, he looks back at Zach, and I swear, hand to God, both into the eye, and he goes, bro, you know this is all fake, right? And I'm laughing my ass off. The defeated look on Zach's face. He looked so heartbroken, and it took you a couple minutes before you realized he was totally fucking with you. Buff was fucking with him. Like, it was still a weird-ass question, but he fucked with him. Because obviously Buff would never use the word fake to describe wrestling. He has too much respect for the business. But he was being a smart-ass to Zach. I high-fived him because it was the funniest shit I've ever seen in my life. So anyway, we eventually moved everything in. It was 8 o'clock in the morning when we left that place.
Oh, Jesus. I
had to drop Zach off. Then I had to go home, take a shower, get dressed, and then drive to Kinship Studios to go shoot the Going Live show. I had the Going Live show that same day. By the way, there's a sketch that's going to come out one day called African American Studies. It's AA Studies. When you see that sketch, that was the sketch that I shot that morning after moving. I had zero sleep when I did that sketch. And that's how Zach met Buff Bagwell. Yep. Moved all his stuff in and everything else. And Buff definitely remembers him. Now, my meeting with Buff Bagwell was in 2014, right around the time when Buff was working a show for UCW, which is the company I would later work for. They were at the Cycle Nation in McDonough, Georgia. At the time, a good friend of mine named Tim Gonzalez, who I've worked with, Buff has worked with, UCW's worked with him a few times before they had a falling out, and he became an enemy. Don't get me started on that shit. But anyway, Tim was running the Cycle Nation, so he was helping UCW book the show. He reached out to me because he wanted the Boochcast to do a remote recording there. Now, at the time, I didn't do remotes anymore. I used to do remotes and then I stopped because now I was live streaming through Blog Talk Radio. So I said, well, I don't really do remotes anymore, but I looked at the flyer and I saw Buff Bagwell on the flyer. And I hadn't seen Buff on TV or anywhere since 2001 when he had the match on Monday Night Raw. More on that later. But ever since then, I had not seen or heard from Buff Bagwell. Hadn't seen him on TV or nothing. But I remember being a big, huge fan of his in WCW. I was a Buff Bagwell fan. I loved Buff Bagwell. Thought he was one of the greats. Felt he deserved a lot more than he got in WCW. I felt he should have been a world champion. I would have loved to have seen him win the WCW title in that match with Booker T on Raw. I felt Buff Bagwell was definitely a gifted, talented wrestler. Before I met him as a person, I was a fan. So I asked Tim, can you get me an interview with Buff Bagwell? I'd love to interview him on the show. I said, well, I can't do it, but I can give you the promoter's number. And that is when I met Voldemort.
Dun, dun, dun.
I sat on the phone with Voldemort for about an hour.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, at the time, Voldemort did not like radio stations or podcasters, mostly because a lot of them tend to shit upon the business. They use the word fake. They ask stupid questions. A lot of radio and podcast people tend to shit on wrestling if they're not wrestling fans themselves.
Don't say the F word. Never say the F word. Don't do it.
Thankfully, the regular guys never did. I'll say that. But I do think that they respected the business more when I became a part of the show. Because I made sure to bring respect and credibility to every interview.
Yeah, that's
why
true.
they had me on every time a wrestler got interviewed. I was coming in the studio. Because I was usually the Friday guy, but they would bring me in on a Monday if Raw was in Atlanta to interview whoever wrestler was coming through to help educate the audience and give credibility and everything else. Because they knew that I had respect for the business and still do. So anyway, I'm on the phone with Voldemort for about an hour. And I convinced him to let me interview Buff. I said, look, I am critical of wrestling. I am.
You are.
But I always respect the business.
You do.
I love it. I respect it. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm not critical of it. I said it before, I'll say it again. If something's good, I acknowledge it's good. If it's shit, I'm going to tell you it's shit.
Yo, yeah.
I'm not going to bash an entire company, but I ain't going to kiss its ass either. At this point, you know this about me. So I explained that to Voldemort. Finally, after a couple days, he called me back and gave me Buff's number to interview him. And me and Jerry Truman did an interview with Buff Bagwell to promote the show at Cycle Nation. Voldemort loved the interview so much, he invited me to the show. I got to ring the bell. Me and Austin King were there. I got to be the bell ringer for the show. Just to kind of volunteer, hang out. I wasn't getting paid for it.
Voldemort paying you. Yeah. We never heard that before, have we?
No, we
No,
of course,
no.
Oh, yeah, always got paid.
No. He doesn't owe me a couple $100. He doesn't owe you thousands of fucking dollars. No.
Not at all.
Fuck you, you fat white trash cocksucker.
There we go. So, anyways, I talked to Voldemort, and while at the show, he loved it. And I hung out with him, and he had his daughters with him. Very sweet girls. We all hung out, went to Applebee's. I think I sang Taylor Swift for one of them. She asked me to. So, again, I was being professional, being polite. And then eventually, as time went on, I was going to be booked to do commentary at the next show. But it got canceled due to lack of ticket sales. And I didn't hear from Voldemort for a few years. Then finally, he was getting UCW back around. And I was able to become a regular commentator there. Now, after we interviewed Buff, I met him at that show later that night. This is still in 2014. And he said, hey, I love the interview. He goes, you did great, man. I hope I was able to answer your questions. I'm like, yeah, I hope I didn't make any of you uncomfortable. Like, no, not at all, bro. Just some things I can remember, some things I can't, And so that was our first interaction with me and Buff Bagwell. Then he remembered me when he started working for a UCW years later. He was regular at UCW shows. So Buff and I would talk. We became friends. We hung out. Then eventually, Buff wanted to do a podcast. And his manager at the time, who's also the girl that gets mentioned towards the end of this, calls me up. And she comes to me and says, Buff wants to do a podcast. We know you're a great podcaster. Can you come down and give us some tips? So I drive down there thinking I'm going to give them a tutorial. I'm going to get them started. So I'm telling Buff what to do, what not to do, what equipment you need. And then all of a sudden, Buff thinks to himself, you know what? Why don't we just do the show together? I'm like, okay. He goes, I'll tell you what. We'll call it the Buff and Boochcast. I went, what? Again. All his idea. I was on a diva and said I needed my name in there. He pitched it to me. So in 2019, for a couple of months, it only lasted a few months before he decided to cut it off because he found it wasn't getting as much traction as he wanted to. But we did a podcast. And we interviewed wrestlers. We had DDP, we had Mark Marrow, we had Sting, we had Lex Luger, Scotty Riggs, Del Wilkes the Patriot. May he rest in peace. We had Scott Steiner. We had
Big Papa Pump.
And Rip Rogers was on as well. So we had a lot of big names, a lot of legends on the show because Buff had a content list a mile long. We tried to get Stone Cold, but just schedules didn't align. But we were this close to getting Steve Austin. We almost got Steve Austin.
Oh, I would be so jelly if you did that. I was like, I hate you.
Oh, yeah. So we had interviews with all these guys, and some of these interviews, I haven't put all of them up, but there's a few of them are here on the Boochcast platforms, if you dig through. You can see interviews because when the show shut down, I got permission to put them here on my platform for people to listen to. So it's a lot of fun. Check them out. But yeah, so we did a podcast for a while. And then 2 years later was when he brought me on to be his manager because he had the falling out with the girl and he was looking for a new manager. He said, you're one of the few people I trust right now. I'd like to offer you the job. And that's how I got the job of being Buff Bagwell's manager. And that lasted for a good period of time until you went to rehab. More on that later. So now I still work with Buff today. It's just not on a regular basis like it used to be. Like we've done a couple shows. Last show we did was back in January. I'm hoping Buff and I will be able to do shows and work together again. When this Darkside came out, after I watched it, I texted him to tell him how much I loved it. And, if you need me for anything, give me a call. That was the last time we spoke. He just wrote back, love you too, buddy. So it was a great time. So that was my meeting with Buff Bagwell. And that was the story of
his was a lot better than mine.
Yes. And then, of course, Elvis met him while we were doing the Chris Canyon episode that he made a cameo appearance on. And like I said, I hope to work with Buff again. We hope to have him on the Boochcast and talk about all the craziness that happened on Darkside of the Ring. But now we're going to get into Darkside of the Ring.
Let's do this.
Marcus Bagwell began his wrestling career as a handsome hero, a fan favorite for audiences to root for. But given the chance to become a villain, the vain and arrogant Buff Bagwell was born.
Yeah.
The bigger he made it, the more he exaggerated, the better it got. He just turned up the volume on his own personality, and that is definitely
his
true.
Personality's way out there, folks.
And here's a direct quote from Too Cold Scorpio. Marcus is a great man to sit down and talk to. Buff the Stuff is an arrogant asshole.
I can see that.
Yeah. Like, you talk to Marcus one-on-one,
Oh, yeah.
He is a tremendous human being to talk
Yeah,
to.
yeah, he is.
But a lot of times when he turns on the Buff gimmick, he does become that arrogant person. It was a great gimmick, and then there were a few times where people felt like he was that way. He wasn't that way with me at all. Like I said, Marcus is hands down one of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Yeah, he's very nice, actually.
He's approachable. He's easy to talk to. He loves to interact with people. He loves to sign autographs. He loves the attention. He doesn't mind it. He's not one of those people that if you approach him, he's going to shoo you away. He'll take the time to talk with a fan. He'll take the time to interact with you. He has 8x10s and he'll sign them for fans. And now, obviously, if he's charging, he's charging. If he's at a convention and he's charging money for autographs, he will charge you money for an autograph at that convention. But if you see him out in public at a restaurant or at a ball game or an event and you ask him for an autograph, he'll sign it for you right then and there. He'll take that picture with you. He will make your day. He's never turned down an autograph in his whole life. To the point where it's pissed off some of the boys that he was traveling with in WCW. There'll be times where Buff will be sitting there signing every last autograph, and you got Sting and Luger going, "Bagwell, you're making us late." And Buff will just quickly sign, and get in the car. Yeah, Marcus is a tremendous human being. You talk to him, he makes you feel special when you talk to him. He was all about working out, tanning, cars, and girls.
Pretty much.
And I can tell you this from personal experience. When Buff decided to cancel the Buff and Boochcast, which was the podcast that we did, because he also has other podcasts since then, more on that later, he was basically saying that not only was it not getting the attention that he felt it should get, his schedule was out of whack, because he was wrestling every weekend. Almost every weekend, he was booked somewhere. But also, he said, I have to go to the gym, and I have to tan, and I got all this other stuff I got to do. And here's the thing. Of all the friends that I have, of all the people I've ever done a podcast with, he is the only one that can tell me I have a hectic schedule that involves working out and tanning, and I would accept that as a valid excuse.
You want to accept that for me?
Never in a billion fucking years. If you called me and said, Vinny, I can't do NXT or anymore, I gotta go to the gym and tan, you'll get your broke, soulless ginger ass to my fucking house. First of all, you're Irish. You can't tan for shit.
No,
I'm half Irish. I can't tan either. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. But fuck. I would, so help me God, so I would grab you by that long ass hair and drag your bitch ass to this fucking studio if you ever pulled that bullshit with me. Buff could get away with it, and I understand why. Because his character was Buff Bagwell. When you have a name like that, you have to be Buff. He said that's the only thing he regrets about having that name, was that it required him to be in shape. He goes to the gym. He gets a tan. He used to dye his hair. He doesn't anymore. He's learned to embrace the gray. If you saw the interview, he had the gray hair. 2 years ago, he would have never fucking done that.
I couldn't see him do that.
I know I had to help him dye it. I
didn't know that.
I would spray the stuff on his head. I had to learn to go far away, and he'd move his head around, and I had to help him dye his hair. So I know he did that. And then he had this trick that he would do with his goatee. He used mascara to dye the goatee.
I see that.
And he got the idea. You want to know where he got the idea from?
Where?
Salma Hayek.
Really?
She would use that with her hair to get rid of any gray areas in her hair. Because she also wanted to look like Salma Hayek.
Oh, yeah.
You know, she had to have the hot hair. Salma Hayek comes out with gray hair. You're like, what the fuck? So he learned that from Salma Hayek.
Yep.
And he did it so fucking well. He had it down to an art that people on the internet were convinced that he drew his goatee on with a Sharpie marker. Because it looked so perfect.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm here to dispel the rumor right now. He never drew on a goatee. That was hair. Legit hair he dyed, but he had it down to a science. I would see him in the front seat of the car, pull out the mascara and dye the hair. And just the precision, the perfection, the care he put. He cared about how he looked. Because back then, and you hear more about this later, wrestlers, it mattered how they looked. They took that shit seriously. He had this hot stuff spray thing he would put on that would make your muscles look bigger. Like, even, not that his muscles were already big from the gym, but it gave you more definition and had the veins popping out. It was like a hot something. and they would all go to Bagwell to get it. Like, Bagwell, break out the hot stuff. And they would pull that out. And then, like, Steiner and Luger would all spray it on to get that spray definition to, like, make the veins look bigger and everything else. You still had to work out and look in shape, which obviously Buff did. He lived in the gym. But he was able to make his physique look good. And most fans tried to shit on him for it by saying it's because he was vain. It's the fact that he wanted the fans to see Buff Bagwell. He cared about the fans so much. It's the equivalent to it, guys, if you have girlfriends or wives. You know how they spend a long-ass time in the bathroom?
Yep.
They take forever to put on the makeup and get their hair done and get everything looking nice.
It takes forever and ever and ever.
Doesn't it?
No? Yeah, it does.
But I'm saying that the reason they do that is because they're trying to look beautiful for you. And also, when they go out in public, you want to have the hot girl on your arm, right? You want the arm candy. So they're looking their best. So when they walk out, the guy's thinking two things. Damn, she's hot. And damn, he's lucky. So they want that look. And that's what they go for. So Buff was kind of similar in that regard. He wanted to look good for the fans. He wanted the fans to see Buff Bagwell in all of his glory. And that meant something to him. And sure, maybe there was a little bit of a vain aspect to it, because most people care about how they look. But it was also for the fans. He wanted the fans to see him in all of his glory. The Buff you remember from WCW. And it took him a while to realize he could come out with the gray hair and still get that respect. The fans still respect the body of work that Buff Bagwell did. They still love what he brought to the table in WCW despite all that. Even if he never set foot in the gym again, which I couldn't imagine him ever not being in the gym, people would still respect him, whether he had the body or not. And he's learned that now. Like, he still wants to look good, as well you should, you know, if you care about how you look, which he does. But he knows that even without the look, he still gets a pop when he goes to the ring. He still gets the love from the fans that he had in his time in WCW. People still remember the impact he had on the business.
That's very, very true, sir. All right.
After his wealthy parents lost their fortune, Marcus turned to wrestling to recapture the lavish lifestyle of his childhood and brought his whole family along for the ride. His parents worked for him. His mother was his secretary. And that was another interesting thing about Buff's career, was the fact that he grew up a rich kid. More on that later. He went broke, got rich again, and then went broke again. And during the period of time we worked together, we borderline had identical bank accounts at one point, which is not good. But eventually, Buff started making, more money again. And then eventually, like I said, and even with the little money he made, he always made sure he took care of me, which is what I always loved about Buff. Like he said, he brought his whole family for the ride. He prided himself on taking care of his family. Once Buff got rich, he hired his family, paid them a salary, he took care of them, he made sure everybody that works with him, and that's the thing about Buff. He takes care of those who take care of him. If Buff says he's going to pay you to do a job, whatever that job is, you can 100% guarantee you're going to get your money. And if you don't get your money that day, he will give you the exact date on when you will get it. Like, there's times where I've worked for him and gotten paid, and he said, all right, look, man, I can't take care of you today, but we got that show on Saturday. So after Saturday, I will pay you everything that I owe you on Saturday. Add it all up. I'll cover you all on Saturday. So I can't pay you today, but I will get you on Saturday for everything you've done. And I said, okay. First time he said that to me, I got a little nervous, but only because I still had PTSD from Voldemort.
Well, yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Because it was the early stages of Buff and I working together. So I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. I get to Saturday, pay me everything he owed me. I trust Buff Bagwell, and I don't trust a lot of people. Like, one question I've been asked a lot by Buff, certain friends, a girl I've recently been talking to that I'll explain more on a variety show, they all ask me one question all the time. Why the fuck do I hang out with him? That is a question I get asked a lot.
By who?
Everybody that's not in the group that's ever met you has asked me why I hang out with you, why I continue to be your friend, why I put up with this guy. They ask me all the time, why do I put up with him?
What did I do?
Zach?
What did I ever do to you?
You've never done anything to me.
I know.
Here's the truth.
What?
Sometimes, Zach, when you're being your sarcastic self, and the people don't know you like I know you, you tend to come off a bit obnoxious. Like, sometimes they look at you and go, what the fuck is wrong with you? What is your problem? Or sometimes you're trying to be nice, but you're a little too pushy. Or there's things that turn people out. They don't bother me because I know you well. They don't bother other people in the group because we got to know you. But when these people are meeting you for the first time, their first reaction is, what the fuck? And I know if they got to know you the way I know you, they'd see that's how you are. But the reason I hang out with this guy all the time, loyalty. I can trust him. If I need his help, he's here. Hey, I need you here to do this Darkside of the Ring. His ass is here. Every Tuesday for NXT, he's here. Unless he's working, which is a rarity, but it does exist. But 99% of the time, he's there. If I need to move a dead body at 3 o'clock in the morning, this is the fucker I'm calling, okay? That's who I'm calling, because I trust him. And I don't trust a lot of people, because my trust has been violated by so many people that it's hard for me to trust people nowadays. It's hard for me to take people at their word. And that's why in the beginning of me working with Buff, as unfair as it was to him, and it was, he had to show me in the beginning he was someone I could trust. And once he did, I felt so comfortable around him. I will say right now, Buff Bagwell is one of the most trustworthy human beings you will ever meet in your life. And he was like that before he got sober. Now that he's sober, that trust is up to Jedi level. But even back when he was fucked up on the pills and the booze, he was still a good man, a trustworthy person. He just had demons. More on that later.
I have my demons.
Yeah, but I'm saying I trust Buff Bagwell. He's a trusting person.
Yes.
And there are people who have violated his trust. We're going to get to that as well. But he genuinely, if he loves you, he takes care of you. And when he needs something from you, he makes sure you're well compensated for it in some way. Buff takes care of those who take care of him. And I took care of Buff, and he took care of me. The combination of injuries and substance abuse sent Marcus's career into a nosedive. Desperate to maintain his lifestyle, he boldly ventured into a controversial new profession. Marcus was the best functioning addict in the world until he wasn't. He achieved so much so fast, and he fell just as fast.
Yeah, I remember that. I was like, as a former recovered somewhat of an addict, he fooled me even. I was like, when they said that, I was like, that's absolutely 100% fucking correct. That's so fucking true.
Oh, I can tell you. He is. And here's the problem. Because he was so good at being a functioning addict, it was hard to convince him that he needed to get help. Because they always say with addicts, you have to hit rock bottom before you realize you have a problem, and that's when you get the most help. When you realize you can't live like this anymore. And that's why Buff was so good as a functioning addict. Here's the thing. How many addicts you know? I'll even throw this question to you, Zach.
Go ahead.
How many addicts you know when you go to their house, it's squeaky clean?
None. Well, hold up. Well, maybe a meth addict, but 9 times out of 10, no.
How many addicts you know, Zach, are well scheduled and well organized?
None.
How many you know have their cars perfectly detailed?
None.
How many do you know show up to work and are able to perform their job?
Definitely none.
Buff was all those things. There was one I was about to say, but I realized Buff never fell in that category, which was, I was going to say how many addicts you know show up on time, and being on time was not Buff's thing. It's because he's a star. The stars could usually show up a little bit late, but we always knew whenever Buff and I were traveling somewhere, there's on time and there's Buff Bagwell time. Like, one of the secrets is if you want Buff to show up on time, tell him the start time is 3 hours before you want him there, and he'll show up on time. Someone did that to him once, and we showed up on time.
It's a miracle.
But because Buff is a star, now Buff wasn't late to the point where it fucked up the show, but we would show up late to a few gigs. But because Buff was the star, people were patient with him, especially on the indies. You know, like, hey, man, I'm only like 20 minutes away. We're going to be there. It's like, all good, man. See you soon. So that's the only thing Buff had in common with, like, addicts was that he was late to places. But that was a thing. His shit was together. It's just he wasn't. Like, he was fucked up on shit, but it wasn't to the point where his life was in disarray. It wasn't until some things that take place later on, like the car accidents, like we'll get more on that later, that's when the shit became a problem. When it started affecting his body, but it never affected his work. In fact, Buff told this story to me once, that him and Luger, because they travel together a lot, they would time their highs. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Buff and Luger would be high as kites on pills and booze throughout the day. They're drinking, they're doing the pills, they're getting their workouts in, they're organizing everything. If you listen to the interview that we did with Lex Luger, Buff goes through the system that him and Luger had with setting up the beer and everything else and getting their party on. But by the time they got to the building for TV or the pay-per-view or even a house show, they were sober backstage because they knew they had to go out to the ring and work and perform. So they would go out to the ring, do their thing, and then once the show was completely over, they went off the air, the fans left the building, and they were getting in their car to either go to a bar or a nightclub or on to the next town. Then they would get back to the party, back on the booze, back on the pills, back on everything. But they were always sober at the show. Buff never once walked into a wrestling ring fucked up and unable to perform, which is more than I can say for a few people, Jeff Hardy. But anyway, my point is, that's how much of a functioning addict he was, to the point where I couldn't even tell if he had a problem.
Yeah, neither did I.
Because I'll be honest, and he even said this once, he felt like he was sedated during that time. And it was such his normal behavior. It wasn't until he got completely sober that I could realize it. I didn't really notice it. I mean, he was tired all the time, but I thought he was sleepy. There were times where he tripped and fell, but he had one bad knee. He was on crutches. So I thought maybe he lost his balance from that. And I wasn't skilled enough to check out signs of drug addicts and alcoholics. For me to tell if somebody was fucked up, they had to be really fucked up. Really staggering, really going or whatever.
Kind of like me.
Yeah, or hey,
I get this a lot.
Hey,
hey.
I like your glasses. That kind of shit. You had to really be fucked up. Really fucked up. And all the time I worked with Buff, he was only really fucked up at a show once. Other than that, he was functioning and doing his job. So that functioning addict thing is real. And also, it was hard for his parents to say anything because they worked for him. And also it's hard for me because I worked for him. So when you got somebody whose life is organized, how do you walk up to somebody like that and go, you have a problem?
You don't.
It's hard. It's hard to tell somebody that something's fucking up their life when their life is going great. You got millions of dollars in the bank, or you did at the time. Like I said, clean, organized, everything. It's hard to convince somebody like that. And I'm in no position to tell him anything.
Neither am I.
The job got done. What he did on his personal time was his business. Who was I to tell him? It was weird. But now that he's sober and I look back on some of those moments, when I look back and saw the Change or Die footage, I can now see how fucked up he really was. But I realize it's because I never saw him completely sober. And I never knew that. And I was amazed and blown away when I saw the difference in him when he was sober. But it's crazy.
It's crazy.
And then, of course, they cut to him in the family office, and he's showing the office. That's his parents' house, by the way.
Yeah.
And I've been in that family office. I've worked out of that family office during the brief period between moving out of the house with Voldemort and moving into Jonna's mom's place, whose mom didn't own it anymore because she died from COVID. And Jonna never sold it, so she let Marcus stay there. And the reason she let Marcus stay there was because she remembers as a little girl all the things Buff did for her and her family growing up, and how apparently her dad wasn't really around, so Buff was the closest thing to a father figure she had, her Uncle Mark. So she's now in a position where she can return the favor. So she did that by having him move into that house, and more on that a little later, but that helped him out in that regard. But in that family office, all the stuff is in there. So I thought that was great that they got to see that. Now, the Bagwell kids were told at a young age they were special and were going to be somebodies in this world. Marcus was an all-county football and baseball player and one of the few people to ever hit a home run out of Sprayberry Park, because he went to Sprayberry High School, which ironically is also where the Wens went to high school. But
ironic? I think not.
Yes. But Bagwell went to Sprayberry High School, and he's apparently, I can't remember if he said he was the only one or one of the few. But I do know that he hit a home run out of, and I'm talking, it doesn't mean a home run like he hit the ball, nobody caught it, and he ran home. I'm talking gone out of the park, into the street, that kind of shit. He hit a home run right out of the park. He wrestled a little bit, but he wasn't on the wrestling team. So he's familiar with wrestling, but didn't join the official wrestling team at school. And it's true. He has pictures of himself when he was a football player, baseball player. We actually did a virtual signing at WrestleCade a few years back where he auctioned off his football helmet and his Letterman jersey. And we had some fans who bought them for good amounts of money.
You didn't have his mouth guard like they did off of Ted?
No. Of course. course, a lot of fans on the internet, when that part came out, they were a little upset about the fact that, their parents told them they were special and be somebody's in this world. And they think that was part of the reason Buff had the attitude that he had later on. Because it's like, that's the problem. Some parents keep telling their kids how special they are and they grow up to become spoiled and all that shit. And here's the thing. To an extent, that is true. But when you're a kid, your parents are going to show you all the love in the world. Some parents eventually, though, they have to balance it out. Like, you're special. You're going to be somebody in this world if you put the work in and everything else. But it's like, my parents told me I was no better than anybody else. Wow, your parents didn't love you. It's extreme on both sides. Every parent thinks their child is special. What they need to explain to them is, just because your parents think you're special doesn't mean the rest of us do. Your parents might think you're special. The rest of us might think you're special needs. You know what I'm saying? Now, Marcus was the youngest of 3 boys, and he developed slower than his older siblings and was scared he wasn't going to get big and strong. Marcus wanted to be like his dad, who was a very successful drag racer and a self-made millionaire. That's true. His dad's actually in the Drag Racing Hall of Fame. Steve Bagwell. That's his name. You can look him up. In fact, one time, Buff and I were at a convention, and this guy came up to us. Super nice guy. A little weird, but nice. And turns out, not only was he a fan of Buff Bagwell, he was just as much of a fan, if not more, of his dad. And he came in with pictures of, Steve Bagwell car and Steve Bagwell articles, and Buff looked at him. I think he might have signed one or whatever, but obviously his dad wasn't at this show, or he would have signed it for him. So Steve Bagwell was a big deal in drag racing. Growing up, they watched sports and loved Georgia Championship Wrestling. However, Marcus didn't have aspirations as a kid about getting into the business. So he was a wrestling fan, just not to the point where he wanted to do it as a profession. The Bagwells were very well known in Marietta, Georgia, and owned Southeast Lumber. Everybody went to get their lumber there, so they had a lot of clientele. Yes, so that's the lumber yard that they owned. They made millions of dollars and were very successful in that business. It was a family-owned business. Every kid, when they graduated, got to run the business. Unfortunately, when it was Buff's turn to do it, that's when things went sour. More on that later. But he met his first wife, Tanya, when they were both 18, and they had an instant connection. And I've actually met Tanya. One time, Buff and I were doing a show for IWN, and we were in McDonough, Georgia. And we were there signing autographs, and Buff was making an appearance in the ring, and I think a few other big stars were there, Kevin Nash, Teddy Long, a few others. And Tanya showed up, and I got to talk to Tanya a little bit and everything, and while Buff was in there, and, I could tell why they had a connection in that conversation. Obviously, they're not dating anymore.
Of course not.
They're not together anymore, but obviously, they're still friends because Tanya's in this interview. Now, everybody wanted to go to the Bagwell house. They had a pool room, a theater room, a batting cage, a tennis court. At 15, his dad bought him a brand new Corvette, and he drove it back and forth to school.
Wouldn't that be lovely to have that when we were in high school? Here's a Corvette. Motherfucker.
Corvette's my favorite car.
Yeah.
That's my dream car, is a red Corvette. But my dad never let me drive my car at high school because he didn't trust kids in the parking lot not to fuck with it. So he said I would get to drive it afterwards. Obviously, I drove to college. There's no choice there. But for high school, I didn't drive to school. We still took the bus. But Buff did talk about that his house was the go-to house for all his friends because of all this cool shit he's got.
Yeah, let's go over to Buff Bagwell stuff. Okay, let's go.
Let's go to the Bagwells. They got, like I said, all this cool shit.
Everything.
Yeah, because they were rich.
Yeah.
That's how rich they were. Well, you can have a big-ass house.
Imagine playing Super Smash Bros. On a big screen TV at the Buff Bagwell house.
That'd be beautiful.
That'd be great.
Or Mario Kart.
Yeah. Or Star Fox.
Star Fox, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Star Fox was my shit.
Yeah, Star Fox was my shit, except for slipping down my fucking nerves. Anyways, another story for another time.
We'll save that for a variety show. Now, Buff was spoiled rotten, but he was not a spoiled brat.
That's fair to say.
His dad wanted him to have all the things in life that he never did, but he still got in trouble and got his ass whipped when he was bad. His dad whipped him once, and his mother whipped him 1,000 times, and the boys were scared of her. Yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys, you do this. Are most men scared of their mothers? Yes. Yeah, we are.
Depends.
Yeah, like, say you fuck up, or like, I'm going to call your mother. Like, shit.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. In my house, I was more scared of my dad than I was my mom.
Yeah.
I wasn't really scared of my mom. I wasn't. Because, like he said, his dad whipped him once. His mother whipped him 1,000 times. For me, it was the opposite. My mother whipped me maybe 3 times. My dad whipped me, I lost count.
Same
I
here.
lost count how many times my dad smacked me around when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that he was spoiled rotten, but he wasn't a spoiled brat. And a lot of people want to know, what's the difference? Here's the difference. There's one word that gives you the difference.
And what is that word?
Gratitude.
Explain, please.
When someone gives you a lot of good things, his dad's like, I want him to have the life I never did. I want to buy him everything he wants. If you're thankful and grateful for everything that they give to you, it's okay. But if you're a brat about it, like you're entitled, you expect it. Or you're like, he bought him a Corvette, and it's like, hey, there's this red Corvette. I wanted blue. It's like, go fuck yourself. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I understand that right
That's
there.
what he means by being a brat.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that rich people like to do. And also fathers love to do. Families in general want to give their kids stuff. Sometimes they can't. And if you're a good son, you understand why you can't get. You might still be disappointed. But as long as you're understanding of why you're not getting this expensive thing. It's like, look, I can't afford it. If I buy you this, we don't have a roof over our head. I got to pay the rent. I got to buy food. I got to do all this stuff. But if I get a chance, I'll get it for you. Sometimes dads will save their money. Like they'll save money and go, okay, now I'm going to go Christmas shopping for my kid. Like they want to give you everything. Now, Judy Bagwell was fearsome and fearless. She either liked you or she didn't. There was no in between. She ran a 215 employee lumberyard. So she ran the lumberyard.
Yeah.
There would be 100 truck drivers walking in thinking she was a pushover. In the 2 minutes, they found out she wasn't. She would give you the shirt on her back with one hand and knock you out with the other hand. And that's true. Buff used to tell me stories all the time. Truck drivers would come in and see this woman walking around. And most truck drivers back then, you know, they're macho.
Macho truck driver.
Yes. And a lot of them, they look at girls like hot pieces of ass and can be a little, you know.
Sexist?
Not sexist.
Mean?
No, it's chauvinistic. There's a difference. Or
Okay.
misogynistic, I'll say.
Okay, there you go.
There's like the difference between sexist and misogyny. You know the difference?
What's the difference?
Let's say I walk into a office room and I got a box of donuts. And I say, hey, everybody, gather around. I got some donuts. And a girl goes, reach for the donut. Sorry, these donuts are for men only. No women are allowed to touch these donuts. That's sexist.
That's sexist.
Because I'm judging you based on your gender.
Mm-hmm.
Here's misogyny. Hey, everybody, grab a donut. Girl grabs a donut. She's eating the donut. Yeah, baby. Lick the icing off that donut,
Basically
you hot
being a
piece.
fucking perv.
That being a pig.
Being a pig.
A misogynist does not discriminate against women, but you're looking at women as sexual objects. So these guys will walk in, right? They're not intimidated by Judy at all. And within 2 minutes, she had them all standing at attention, like soldiers in the military. That's what Buff would tell me. Be standing at attention, and Judy be letting them know what the fuck's going on, what the fuck you're gonna do. You know.
I remember those days at military school. Oh, jeez.
Dude, whatever manhood they had would shrivel up in a fucking heartbeat. She stripped them of all their pride. Because Judy, she ran shit here. You just work here. And speaking of working there, here's how strict Judy was.
Uh-oh.
And again, Buff told me these stories.
All right, go ahead.
Zach, let's say you worked in this lumberyard.
Okay.
I'm Judy Bagwell.
Okay.
I ask you for a pen.
Okay.
You don't have a pen.
Uh-huh.
Your ass is fired.
What the fuck?
She would fire you on the spot if you didn't have a pen. Everybody had to have a pen. If I say, Zach, I need a pen.
Here's your pen.
Thank you. You didn't have a pen, you were fired. Because a pen is a big part of your job when you work in a lumberyard. You got to fill out forms, fill out documents, sign for shit. So if she asked you for a pen, you didn't have one, that was your job. That was your ass. You're gone. Judy did not take bullshit.
I can see that.
She didn't stand for shit, and she had to be that way to be married to a guy like Steve Bagwell back then. But that's the thing. At the same time, she was very loving and very caring. When I met her, she was a sweetheart.
Like grandma sweetheart?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Now, this is back when Judy was, like, very, very sick. They had this, like, hospital bed in the living room of their house. When Buff was living there and I would go to see him, while we were still working out of there during the transition period between, again, Voldemort and Jonna. So while I'm in there, Judy was talking to me, right? And she said, so you enjoy working with Marcus? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. She goes, oh, that's so great. Like, she was so polite. And then because she had dementia, going there again, and she didn't recognize me.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fine. I'm not offended. I understood the situation because that was one thing Buff and I bonded over, in addition to, loving my
Yeah,
friend,
I know why.
was dementia because,
Yeah.
His mom was dealing with dementia, and I had a grandma who died back in December of 2013 from dementia. Yeah. And she lived here while she was suffering from it.
Yeah.
And then we had to finally put her in a home, and then a year to the day she went in the home, she died.
Yeah, I remember my grandpa before he passed away. He passed from COVID, but he also, for what my cousin told me, he developed dementia too. He said he didn't even recognize me. I was like, are you shitting me? He was like, No, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah. So we bonded over that. So when I went over, she's like, "Who are you?" And Steve goes, "This here's Vinny. This is Marcus's friend. He helps him out." I swear to God, she looked at me and she went, "He's cute." I didn't know how the fuck to answer that. What the fuck do you do there? I don't know.
I think she was just being nice to you.
I don't know. All I know is she said that. I didn't know what the fuck to do. So I'm just like, I said, "Thank you." I didn't know what to say there.
What did Buff do?
He wasn't in the room.
Did you tell him that he laughed his ass off?
I was scared to tell him.
You still haven't told him after all these years?
No.
Are you going to?
No. If he sees this, the only way he's going to know is if he sees this video. Then he'll know.
Damn, I want to ruin it.
But that's what I say. How do you say that to somebody? You don't say that to your friend that your mom said you're cute. You can't answer that.
Well, she's not with us anymore, so I don't think he's going to care. No above how good of his personality, sense of humor is. She's probably going to laugh.
But I'm just saying, that would be like if I visited your mom and she said I was cute. I couldn't tell you that. Or if my mother said you were cute, I couldn't look at you the same way. I don't know if I can hang out with you anymore. I have to take like a couple month break to get that image out of my fucking head.
I know I'm getting the image in my head.
Again, and it's not because I'm not saying that girls won't think you're good looking, but still, you're my friend. My mother shouldn't have those thoughts. And your mother shouldn't have those thoughts about me. Now, Steve was more calm, except when he lost the poker bet.
Yeah, but I saw that scene. Every time he lost a puck, he just... Wham!
Well, he would play poker with his friends in the house while the kids played upstairs, which some parents do that.
My parents do it all the time.
I've had parents that play games with friends and shit while the
cards
kids upstairs. Yeah. Now, one time, Steve lost so bad, he went and grabbed a machine gun.
Oh, yeah.
He kicked open the double doors and shot all the geese in the lake in the front yard.
Yeah.
Buff thought they were being robbed, so he pulled out a cocked 45 to go help his dad.
Ooh, those were powerful guns, too.
Yeah, he had a 45. He cocked it.
That's one of the most powerful handguns.
Well, that's the thing. His parents carried handguns.
Well, yeah, it's Georgia.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, also because his dad took Buff and the boys hunting.
Yeah.
They would go hunting sometimes on guide trips.
Yeah.
So
I've been hunting a couple times.
I've never been. So they were trained at a young age how to use a gun.
Yeah.
And that's a key thing when dealing with guns is if you're taught responsibly how to use a gun, then the Second Amendment is important to you.
Yeah, like
and also there are some people who are able to operate a gun and defend themselves responsibly. And if you are able to do that, I believe you should be allowed to own a gun.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not fit to own a gun, you shouldn't own one. Nope. But I'm saying that's why the Second Amendment is a big fight. Because even though there are some people who somehow get access to guns, which is easy to do no matter how much the laws
America.
are. But I'm saying that there are some people who are able to own a gun and operate it responsibly, and those people shouldn't be punished. It's the people who don't know how to use it that illegally get access to. They're the ones that need to be punished. Buff uses it responsibly. His dad nowadays uses it responsibly.
Yeah.
That time, not so much.
Not so much. Jeez,
But here's the thing.
man.
I didn't even know about this story, though.
Yeah, I was like, he did what?
There's a bunch of geese in the front yard. He just shot all the
and over a poker bet?
Here's the thing I want to know. If I can interview Buff, I want to know this.
How much did he lose?
Yes. How much money did you possibly lose to make you... Think about it. How much money would you have to lose in a poker game to the point where you would pull out a machine gun and just randomly shoot geese in your front yard?
I'll do it for free because I hate geese.
Yes, but I'm saying, how much money would you have to lose to drive yourself to that point?
It has to be a shitload. Maybe he lost a shitload.
But then again, he's a millionaire. So how much would really be a shitload?
You have to ask Buff that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how much did he lose is what I want to know. I want to know, like, was it enough money to where I could go, all right, I see you losing your mind there? Or is it to the point where I'm like, seriously?
Really?
That's how much you lost?
How much?
And you're that much of a sore loser?
Jeez.
Like that. The amount of money would help me determine whether I think this is...
By the way,
insane.
I'm never a sore loser.
My nephew would beg to differ.
Yeah, that's different.
All right.
His dad would also hand out cocaine to his friends because he knew his kids would go out and cause trouble. And Steve trusted the guy he was buying his coke from, so he felt it was easier just to help out.
Father of the Year?
Back then, maybe?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know about that. Okay, I have nothing to say. I understand why, but what the fuck?
Yeah, his dad gave out cocaine. Here's the thing. You would think that this would shock me. Now, Clearly, Zach is surprised. I'm not. Most people are shocked at like, what kind of father would give their kid drugs and everything? But the mindset that Steve had was that if his kids are going to hang out, chances are they're going to do drugs. And I'm assuming this is probably roughly during like, the 70s, the 80s, whatever, especially the 80s. This is back when cocaine was a thing.
Yeah.
So people were going to go out and were going to do cocaine and going to rebel. But there's always the possibility of someone getting, cocaine that's laced with something else, or it might be like too strong or whatever, and it could be really, really bad for you. When I hear stuff like this, like dads doing stuff like this, it kind of reminds me of like in the 90s or in the early 2000s when they were preaching abstinence or not having sex because teenage pregnancy was very high. And they were trying to get kids to not have sex or just say no, which some kids... Maybe most kids, they're going to have sex when they're teenagers. If you think you're going to prevent your kid from having sex, I want to know what drug you're taking that's making you that delusional of a human being. Because there's only 3 types of kids in the world. There are kids who don't have sex for religious reasons.
Christian kids.
Mormon
kids.
Kids who don't have sex because nobody wants to fuck them. And number 3, there's kids that are fucking everything that moves. The only way you're going to get kids to not have sex is... if either A, they're from a strong religious household where they're taught, wait till you're married, which some people are like that.
Very true.
And then also there's kids that just nobody wants to fuck. So some parents who are aware of this would give their kid a condom before they leave, whether it's a guy or girl. Like, hey, mostly guys.
Mostly guys.
Yeah, girls. Some of y'all might have gotten condoms from your parents. I don't know. But I know as guys, they would always do the thing like, hey, here's this. We don't want you to have sex. But if you get in a situation where sex is going to happen, please put this on so at least she doesn't get pregnant. So that was what they did. They would give kids condoms and whatnot. So in a way, that's kind of the mindset that Steve had only with cocaine. My kids are going to do drugs anyway. So here's some drugs. And like I said, I trust my dealer. So at least you're getting cocaine that's just cocaine. And you're only going to feel the effects of regular cocaine. There's nothing extra that could make you seriously OD or get you chemically imbalanced or whatever. Here's a reasonable amount. Cocaine, here's a couple ounces. So you're good. So that was the mindset. But the reason this didn't shock me, and I'm going to say this, was because during the time that I was around Buff, and this is before he got sober. Again, circle_highlight, before he got sober. He would get his somas from his dad. His dad was helping him get his somas and stuff. Now, at the time, I didn't know that he was getting somas until like way later. Because in the beginning, I just thought he was getting, his meds. He called them his meds. And I know that Buff had a lot of prescription meds at the time. And so I thought he just was getting his meds and everything from the pharmacy and everything. I was just going to pick them up and bring them to the house. It wasn't until later on that I started realizing I was getting the somas. Because he never called me. He never said, hey, go to my dad's house and get my somas. It's like, no, go over there and get my meds. And I'm like, all right, I'll pick up his prescription meds. Because I know he took prescription meds. Like he had Suboxone and other stuff that he took. Like Suboxone was meant to help overrule the soma addiction, so that was what that was for. So I don't know where he got the somas when he was on the road wrestling, but I know for a period of time his dad did help him get those. Now, obviously, that doesn't happen anymore now that Buff is clean and sober. So when I hear that his dad gave him cocaine, I'm like, this should shock me. But because of the whole Soma thing, it doesn't. I believe this. Like,
yeah, I do too.
This is not a story they made up for Darkside of the Ring.
No,
I believe this 100%. And
yeah.
Just to be clear, I'm in no way, shape, or form knocking Steve Bagwell for this. I've met Steve. He's a nice guy. I've always gotten along with him. I'm just, again, telling the truth. And of course, as we all know, Buff's sobriety date is, I've heard him say August 26th. I've heard him say August 27th. Of 2022. So even at the time that we're recording this, at the time this video is coming out, he is still sober. He's been sober since August 2022. And August 26th is the day that's been brought up because that was the same day in 2010 that I first appeared on the Regular Guy show. And August 27th, 2006 was the first day I ever did comedy. So whichever sobriety date it is, either way, those are dates that stick out to me as well. As the Bagwells' business struggles, Judy reveals to her husband the family's finances are in serious trouble. Judy took out 3 or 4 loans at $250,000 apiece and convinced the bankers they could pay it back. They didn't, and the business went under. By this time, the older brothers had moved out. It was just Mark and his parents in the house, and there was constant fighting and drama. So while his brothers are in different houses, not having to deal with the shit, he's home dealing with the fighting and the drama, which when you lose a business like that, you're losing money.
That's true as well.
And that will cause arguments in a relationship, especially for women. And I'm just being honest here. It's like the old saying for a man, if you lose your job, you're going to lose your woman. She may not leave right away, but the countdown has begun. There's not a lot of ride or dies in this world anymore.
Very true.
So I'm saying there was a lot of fighting and drama and everything.
Yeah.
Now, one night, Judy left to get in one of the cars, and Steve followed her out and said, "Where are you going?" She said, "I'm leaving." He said, "Not in my car, you're not. If you try to, I'll shoot the tire." The altercation soon becomes physical, and Judy screams, Mark, help me, help me." He comes running down the stairs with a pistol. He says, "Dad, back off of Mom." Steve says, "What are you doing with that gun?" Mark says, "I just want you to back off of Mom." Steve says, "You'd shoot me?" Mark says, "No, sir, unless I have to." So that 45 that he pulled out earlier when the dad was shooting the geese, he's got that gun pointed at him.
That's a very, very powerful fucking gun.
Yes.
It's a very powerful gun.
He's got that sumbitch pointed right at his dad. Steve runs to the kitchen and grabs the gun he always kept on top of the refrigerator, which is a revolver. So he has a revolver, and he always had it on top of the refrigerator. So he runs and grabs that. He points it at Mark and says, "Come on, big man, come on." Now Mark says, "Put the gun down, man. You're just going to end up killing one of us and going to prison, bro. This ain't going to do nothing." So that's what Mark's doing right now. He's trying to de-escalate the situation because he realizes now, okay, this is going to get serious. And Steve keeps egging him on, and finally Mark fires the gun at his dad. Buff planned to kill his father at that moment. So before he didn't want to kill his dad. Once he pulled that trigger, it's like, I want this man dead. Steve put up his hand to block the shot, and he got shot on the side of his wrist and lost 1.5 inches of bone. Mark shot him 4 more times, and the bullets whizzed by his head. Steve had to go to the hospital, and Mark didn't talk to him for 4 months because he had no remorse for what he did. His dad finally calls him and apologizes and admits his son did the right thing protecting his mom. Today, they are the best of friends.
Which is odd.
Yeah.
You have to shoot your own old man just to become good friends with him. Wow.
Well, that's not the reason they're the best of friends. It's just that they became the best of friends later on because once everything cooled down, they had a real father-son relationship. And now he and his dad get along great, except for the occasional argument and things like that. But overall, in that moment, he said, I don't feel bad about it. Because, again, his dad was beating up his mom in that moment. And this is just a thing. And it's not even just an Italian thing. It's a man thing in general. You don't fuck with someone's mother.
Very true.
Men in general, we don't play that shit. Now, Italians...
No, they don't.
Italians take it to a higher level than the average man.
We Irish do too.
But men in general will not put up with that shit.
Yeah, no.
We don't.
No, we don't.
I've been in many fights as a kid because someone talked shit about my mom. I remember being at my mother's place of employment when I was in college. And someone yelled at my mom, "Fuck you, bitch," and I almost killed him. And my mother literally had to grab me and pull me into the car because I was going to kill this motherfucker. And my mother had to approach this individual later at her place of employment and inform this young lad that I was about to take his fucking life. So my mother gave the kid detention, but he also warned him she saved his life. She did. I don't know if that guy's watching this or not because I'm not going to mention my mom or her place of employment right now, but I'm going to say this. That kid has no idea that my mother saved his life because I would have murdered him. I did not care. You talk shit about my mother, I will fucking kill you. I am that kind of guy. You don't fuck with my mother. I don't play that shit. When I was a kid, I didn't play that shit. I've been in fights because of that shit. Nobody in my family plays that shit. I've seen my dad smack relatives out of their chair for bad-mouthing my grandmother, his mother. It's shit adults don't play. So we will defend our moms and have no remorse for what we do to the person that bad-mouths our mother. So he didn't feel bad. And his dad knew he fucked up. He should have never put his hands on Judy. And when he apologized, that's when everything came about. And he actually was proud of Mark for defending his mother. Now, obviously, he wishes he wouldn't have gotten shot. But he understands.
Yeah, he showed it. This is where he shot me right here.
And here's the thing, though. If Steve hadn't put his hand there, he would have died.
I gotcha.
Because of where Buff was aiming for. But his dad kind of sensed the trigger being pulled, so he blocked it. And that's why he got hit in the wrist. If he hadn't put his hand there, it would have went right through his chest, possibly near the heart, and it would have killed him.
That's true.
That's exactly what happened. He would have killed his dad in that moment. And again, he wanted to in that moment because, again, he was defending his mom who was getting beat up. And here's the crazier part. Not only are Steve and Buff the best of friends today, Steve and Judy never got divorced. They stayed married up until she died. And to my knowledge, there was no more domestic violence incidents after that.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. So that concept of, he hits you once, he'll hit you again, It's not always true.
That's true.
You know, sometimes it is, but not necessarily. There are some people that have been in situations where they've been abusive and then they turn their lives around, either through therapy or through anger management or through just feeling remorse after they see the damage they caused. Some people are capable of changing from that. Now, just to be clear, I am not saying women have to put up with that. If a man hits you and you want to break up and leave him, you are well within your rights to do that. I would not shame you for it. So I'm not saying women should stay with abusive men. I am not saying that. If you want to leave, leave. You are well within your rights to do that. I'm just saying not every abusive guy is going to be abusive forever. Some men are capable of change. It's up to you whether or not you love the guy enough to see if he can change. And if you don't, that's fine too. Nothing wrong with that. And what's also interesting is that this was one of the stories that we pitched to Tara on the car ride when we were talking about Darkside of the Ring.
Yeah.
I said there was a couple stories that we pitched to her that got her attention.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first story Buff pitched to her, was the story of him shooting his dad.
And she goes, oh.
She was like, whoa.
Whoa.
First of all, she did not expect to hear that story. And two, she's thinking, oh my God, this is going to be great. Like, content people, content creators, they love stuff like that. Anything that they can turn into content that's going to be a compelling story, they're going to go for. Because that's really the concept of making a TV show like Darkside of the Ring. Yes, you want to talk about dark side moments, but you want something that's going to be a good enough story to captivate the audience and bring them in. What can we tell? And Buff has stories for days. That is literally his gift. He is a masterful storyteller. In the ring and out of the ring. He is a masterful storyteller. Because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. When this shows up in the Dark Side video, we're 11 minutes and 30 seconds into the show is when this happens. Buff has not even gotten in a wrestling ring yet. And look at all the shit he's gone through already.
Pretty much.
And he hasn't even gotten the business. He hasn't touched any of the somas or nothing. At best, he's done cocaine and drank, but he's not an out-of-control teen, really.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
You know? Or if he was, it wasn't out of control to the point where he got caught a whole lot. Now, I will say, though, I did see an incident once with Buff where he had a big fight with his dad a few years back. I think his dad owed him money or something. I can't remember what it was. There was some type of argument, and I was driving to the house. Because this is usually what happens. I would get off work at my social media job that I had at the time, and I would drive to Buff's house. And Buff, most of the time, would keep his door unlocked. And I could just walk on in. I had the right to just walk on in if I wanted to. Because he knew me. He trusted me. So I walk on in. I don't know what happened before this. I don't know what was discussed. All I know is this is what I hear when the doors open and I walk in. All I hear Buff say on the phone is, the next motherfucker I see is getting shot.
Time to go.
Yeah. So in that moment, I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I locked myself in the bathroom. And the housekeeper saw me. So she comes to the bathroom, knocks on the door, and she's going, Vinny, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. She goes, are you going to come out? I'm like, no. She's like, why? He goes, I don't want to get shot. He just said the next motherfucker he sees is getting shot. I don't want to get shot. I don't know what he's mad about. He has the revolver next to him on the couch. I'm not fucking... She goes, Vinny, you're going to be fine. He's not going to shoot you. And so I walk out, and I'm, like, nervous. I'm, like, shaking. I'm like, dear God, help me. Buff finally hangs the phone up, looks up at me and goes, hey, buddy. just like you normally would. Hey, buddy, how you doing? What's going on? I'm like, good. Are you okay? And she's like, and she goes, he heard you say about getting shot, and he was afraid he was going to get shot. So Buff starts laughing. He goes, I'm sorry about that, buddy. Dude, I wouldn't shoot you. My dad owed me money. I was pissed off. I ain't going to shoot you. You're good. I'm like, okay. But here's the thing. Usually, if you threaten somebody and say, I'm going to fucking shoot you, most of the time, the guy's not going to shoot you.
No, not.
Here's the thing, though. Buff's dad knows not to take that as an empty threat. Because he thought when he was a teenager, he wouldn't shoot him. If he's in his 50s, yeah. If he shot you when he's 18, he won't shoot you when he's like 50. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
With his parents no longer able to support him, Marcus moves out of the family home, marries his high school sweetheart Tanya, and finds a whole new way to make a living.
I wonder what that is.
Becoming a male stripper.
He was like, I don't care about showing off my butt. He's like, you got more guts than I do.
Well, that's the thing, because he was in shape.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the thing. He was an athlete, and Marcus has always been one of those guys that takes pride in the fact that he has a body and is able to show it off. He loves doing that.
Yep, yeah, I hear you.
And you could tell that with his Buff Bagwell persona. But yeah, so he becomes a male stripper. I think he dances Swinging Richards, if I'm not mistaken, because I know that's the only male strip club that I'm aware of.
I don't know.
And I know that Scott Steiner brought it up when they were feuding. You talk about how Scott Steiner is a real man, and real men aren't Chippendale dancers. And then you say things like Buff Bagwell is flaming.
You can't say that today now, can he?
I mean,
No, he could. He could. Scott Steiner could, and he would, but if he did it like in Raw, SmackDown, hell, NXT, canceled.
Oh, yeah.
He'll be canceled like a motherfucker.
Oh, they already want to cancel Roman Reigns for calling Seth Rollins a cross-dresser.
Oh, bite me.
But I'm saying that, that's what he decided to do, and he was really good at it. He made good money, he did a good job, and it was able to help him out and pay his bills. Now, they later move into Poplar Place Apartments, and there he meets valet and commentator Missy Hyatt.
Missy Hyatt. And, Vinny, there's a show on YouTube that sometimes puts former female wrestlers who worked in the business in the hoe bag. Is Missy Hyatt she's a hoe?
Yes.
She's a hoe? Damn. A young Missy Hyatt? You won't say no to that, would you?
Young Missy Hyatt, no.
Today's Missy Hyatt, way too much plastic surgery.
Today's Missy Hyatt, I'll pass.
I'm still respectful for our valet and a commentator. Yeah. Big deal. She fucked a bunch of wrestlers. But what young girl hasn't in the business? Like,
I really don't give a shit.
I don't care what goes on.
Goes
on in the locker room, stays in the locker room.
It used to. Now it only does if you're in WWE. She was looking for an apartment in Atlanta, and she saw Mark in short shorts and a tank top and says, I want to live near him. At the time, Missy was working for WCW, where she managed the Steiner Brothers, Hot Stuff, Eddie Gilbert, and the Nasty Boys.
The Nasty Boys. Oh, yeah, I remember the Nasty Boys. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Jesus Christ, they were nuts.
She was also the first female in wrestling to become an announcer.
Okay, really?
Yes.
Oh, I did not know that.
She was the first woman to become like an announcer, like a backstage interviewer, do announcing. Before that time, no women did that. Those weren't women jobs yet. Nowadays, you see women doing them all the time.
True.
Backstage interview, mostly ring announcing, things like that.
My favorite announcer of all time when it comes to female is the beautiful Lillian Garcia of all time.
No one can ever replace her.
No one ever replace Lillian Garcia.
The girl that does it today, I can't remember her name.
Are you talking about, what about NXT?
No, I'm talking about Raw. The girl that does Monday Night Raw.
Yeah,
she's good.
She's good. The girl in NXT, she's pretty good too. I like her, yeah.
Mark approached her one day and told her his brother wants to become a wrestler. She says, why don't you become a wrestler? And Mark says, those guys don't make no money. She says, our lowest paid guy makes $100,000 a year. And Mark goes, what?
$100,000? Dude, sign me up. Where do I sign?
Exactly. She sets up a meeting with Steve the Brawler Lawler, who trains Mark to become a wrestler.
Not related to Jerry the King Lawler.
He is not related to Jerry Lawler.
Okay.
But yeah, so Steve the Brawler Lawler is who trained Buff to become a wrestler. Now, I've heard this story told a little differently, because I heard Mark said he was laying out by the pool when it happened. And obviously, he and Tanya were broke. Like, they were just getting by with his, being a male stripper and everything. And now, Tanya was working as a dancer at a club, and she hated it. But since Mark couldn't work a job and train to become a wrestler, because it's very time-consuming, he makes a deal with her that if she works while he goes through wrestling school, when he gets his first contract, she'll never have to work again. So that's the deal he wants to make with her.
That's a hell of a deal.
So Tanya agrees, and she keeps dancing at the club, doing what she's got to do to bring in the money. Because Buff, in the early time of his career, he was making $75 a night wrestling, which back then was a big deal. Today, not so much.
Of course not.
But he was making $75 a night on average and training. And he said that secret to getting through that tough time, it was because of Missy Hyatt. Because Missy Hyatt taught him, look, right now at this stage in your career, you're not in this to make money. You're in this to learn. Right now, you're learning how to work. You're training. You're trying to become great so you can make money later. So for now, don't worry about the money. Because Mark said if he had put all his focus on the money, he never would have made it. Because $75 a night would have drove him nuts. But he said right now, just when you're in the locker room, shake everybody's hand, keep to yourself, play the game, behave, take your $75 a night, and just learn the business. And if somebody's going to give you advice, listen, pick their brains, sit under the learning tree of whoever's willing to teach you. And Missy Hyatt was explaining that to him, to remind him that's important. And that's what got Buff through that tough time when he was making low money and he was going through the ranks, was that he had to remember, you're learning the business right now. But once you get to WCW, once you get to the big time, once you get there, you'll make more money and you'll be ready. But until you get there, got to play the game. And that was the thing. That's what got him there, because there were so many times where people wanted to hate Buff when he was in the wrestling, but they couldn't because he was being respectful. Because Mark was, and this is his words, not mine, he was the pretty boy in the locker room. He had the good-looking body, which a lot of people hate. That's why most of the time, when you see heels in wrestling, they tend to have the body. The most attractive guys in the locker room tend to be the heels most of the time. And the reason is because men hate attractive men because they're jealous, because they're getting all the pussy.
True.
Because there'll be guys in the stands bringing their girlfriends or their wives, and their girlfriends and wives will be looking at Marcus like, I would so cheat on you with him, and that's their...
Oh, why can't you look like that?
Exactly. Training to become a professional wrestler, Marcus Bagwell dedicates himself to becoming a superstar. He starts working the indie circuit as the Handsome Stranger. Missy saw one of his matches and was amazed that within 3 months of training, he had timing, the look, and the charisma down. She sends a tape to Jim Barnett, and he's so impressed he gets signed to WCW and goes by his full legal name, or his shoot name, or as we say on the show, his Christian name, Marcus Alexander Bagwell. So he started off as the Handsome Stranger.
Yeah.
Basically, him in a Zorro mask. He'd
You
walk
couldn't tell us Buff in the first fucking place. Yeah. That's you, dude, with a $5 cheap mask from Walmart.
and he'd walk to the ring and he'd give out roses to the women.
Yeah.
And he'd go out to the ring. And here's the thing. A lot of people thought it was ridiculous because it's like, you have Marcus Bagwell, who, as again, these are his words, not mine, with a pretty boy look. Why would you put a mask on him? Why would you have someone attractive cover their face? That's usually what you do to either the luchadors or the ugly people. Like, if you have a guy who's butt ugly looking, put a mask on him. For that, they didn't mention this. But before that, he had another gimmick prior to the Handsome Stranger that only lasted a brief period of time. And it was called Fabian.
I never heard of
They
Fabian.
never mentioned it, but
No, but you, no one...
here's how I know this. If you go to MarcusBuffBagwell.com, go to his website, he has DVDs for sale, and they're 5 volumes. And he has all of his matches on tape. And he compiled the best of the best for each of these DVDs. The first one is a video of him and Scorpio and their best tag matches.
Oh, hell yeah.
Volume 2 is Buff Bagwell, the best of Buff the Stuff. Number 3 is him and Del Wilkes, the best of their video, which we're going to get to them in a minute. The Volume 4 is him and Scotty Riggs, the best of them. And Volume 5 is Fabian and the Masked Stranger. So it has some Fabian matches and some Masked Stranger matches.
Did he put on a mask, anything, or just go...
Fabian did not have a mask.
He just goes out looking like normal old Buff?
He went out looking like normal white meat Marcus Bagwell, just as Fabian.
Okay.
And they tried that for a while. Then they wanted to give him a persona, so they went with the Handsome Stranger. But the Handsome Stranger went over more than Fabian. That's probably why they didn't mention it. And in 3 months, he took to the business. It took 3 months of training before they signed him to WCW. That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Because most people, when they train, they'll train for years before they have a match. Like, it's a big deal. And he also said that Dusty Rhodes also was part of the hiring process. And it was Dusty Rhodes who suggested he go by Marcus Alexander Bagwell.
Here we go.
It was Dusty's idea. Because Buff at first didn't want to use his full name, but he's like, no, trust me, baby. You got that good look. You got that pretty boy look. You walk to the ring. Marcus Alexander Bagwell, it just fits you perfectly, baby. It fits you perfectly, baby. It fits you perfectly. With a successful 2-year run as a singles competitor, Marcus proves his talent to WCW and is put into a tag team with Too Cold Scorpio. They quickly developed great chemistry and won Tag Team of the Year in 1993 and the WCW World Tag Team titles that same year, while being managed by Teddy Long.
Yeah, I saw that too. I was like, dang. Teddy Long, he ages well, by the way.
Yes.
You know, he aged well. He still looks the same, just a little older. Now Teddy Long's gray, but today you're like, looks the same.
And Scorpio and Buff had the most amazing chemistry. Like, Scorpio was very much a high flyer.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of the original high flyers.
One of the ones that are actually good.
And does it right, yeah. I mean, he does have some moments that'll make you cringe, but they're few and far between. Scorpio said it the best. We had the dance, we had the moves, and we had all the hoes back in the day.
They probably did.
Yeah. They were...
Knowing Buff and Too Cold Scorpio, I know Too Cold Scorpio was married, but yeah, I was like, oh, of course.
they were definitely had the hoes.
They had the hoes.
But they would come out and do a dance in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see Buff, like, in the beginning, like, trying to follow along with Scorpio. But then eventually, it just came naturally to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Marcus showed that, you know, I'm the pretty boy, I'm the white meat babyface, but I got some rhythm. Like he's white with a little bit of flavor.
Had the flavor.
Yes. They actually won the tag belts on Saturday Night Main Event against the Nasty Boys. The only thing that sucks is the next night of Halloween Havoc, they dropped the belts right back to the Nasty Boys. They were tag champs for like a day.
For a good solid 24 hours.
Which sucked because
I saw that.
I felt they deserved better.
Bullshit.
Especially since they had tag team of the year.
Exactly.
And not only that, here's the other thing about Buff. In addition to being tag team of the year, he was rookie of the year. As a solo competitor, and I believe it was 90 or 91, he won rookie of the year. And it was between him and DDP for rookie of the year.
Oh, okay.
And Bagwell won over Dallas. So Buff definitely showed that he could work, he could wrestle, and this is his venture into tag team wrestling. Now, Marcus was popular with the fans, especially the women.
Of course.
He loved Tanya, but wasn't prepared for the amount of women that would throw themselves at him, and at 21, wasn't able to handle it. So he wound up cheating on Tanya. Tanya was heartbroken and wasn't able to forgive him, so they got divorced.
Well, ugh. It happens. I was like, okay, you married a little too young there, man. But I was like, what the hell you can do to a wrestler cheating on his spouse or wife? Yeah, we've never heard that before, have we?
Well, there's plenty that have done it, but
Yeah,
it's
of
like,
course.
but in a way, it's kind of like a tough situation because again, you're a young kid at 21,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the lessons people always say is it's easy not to cheat when no one wants to fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's okay to cheat,
'Cause
and
it's
I'm not
not.
saying that resisting temptation is not doable. It is. It's just tough. And, Marcus wasn't prepared for that. And obviously, on the one hand, you can kind of sympathize with that a little bit, understanding that he was not prepared for the amount of women that were going to throw themselves at him and the awkward situations. But at the same time, it does kind of suck because you made that deal with her. Like, hey, go through this job that you hate with a passion while I pursue this. And then when I get my contract, I'll take care of you. So in a way, it's kind of like she took the gamble on you and got fucked over. That's kind of the vibe and the feeling there. But ultimately, Marcus was the one that ended up filing for divorce. Because Buff was the one that filed for divorce in all of his divorces. And all the times he's been married.
And I know that, huh?
He's the one that filed for divorce, not the other person.
Oh, okay.
Like, there was a separation, but Marcus's problem with Tanya was he was like, look, he's apologized. He's going above and beyond as a husband to say, look, I fucked up. I'm sorry. But she couldn't find in her heart to forgive him. So he's like, look, if you can't forgive me, then obviously we're not going to move past this. And to an extent, I get that as well. Like, look, I'm not saying that you have to forgive somebody right away. But if you're going to stay married to somebody who cheated on you, and I'm going to say this whether it's a guy cheating on the girl or the girl cheating on the guy. So this is either way. If you're going to stay together, the only way the marriage is going to work is if you're ready to forgive and move forward. Until you can do that and get back to a point where you can trust your spouse again to not cheat again, there's no point in saving the marriage. Because without trust, you have no marriage.
That's true.
And again, obviously Marcus violated that trust.
You did.
So we're not letting him off the hook. But all we're saying is, if Tanya's not willing to forgive him for it and move on, there's no reason to stay. That's the thing. You either need to forgive him and move on, or say, I can't do this, and leave. And after a certain point, so much time apologizing and having remorse and trying to right the wrong, without Tanya willing to meet him halfway, there was just no point.
Yep, that's true.
So they end up getting divorced. As his marriage to Tanya ends, Marcus is slotted into a new tag team called Stars and Stripes with the Patriot Del Wilkes. That's the volume 3 on the DVD. Determined to reach the top of WCW, he's convinced that the key is to create the perfect body. So he goes and gets calf implants because he struggles to get his calves to grow. Eventually his legs start hurting to the point where his roommate has to give him piggyback rides to the bathroom. Eventually he got a fever and had to be rushed to the hospital because his body wasn't accepting the implants. In the end, it was either remove the implants or amputate his legs.
Calf implants? I didn't know you could do those. I heard of women getting breast implants, but calf implants? Shit, I didn't know that.
Well, you can get implants just about anything. There's people who have gotten
Really?
chest implants. People have gotten implants down there. You know, people have gotten like surgeries and stuff to change parts of their body. So he went and got implants.
And then you have to worry about your body rejecting them. After I heard that, I said, you know what? I'm not going to do shit to my body. The only thing I'm going to do to my body is get more tattoos. That's it.
Well, the thing is, because like I said, he was struggling to get his calves to grow. And usually when you're an athlete or a bodybuilder, that shit wears on you. Like a lot of times, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was in bodybuilding, he would wear really short shorts or whatever to check on his legs to make sure they were defined properly. And there's a part of the body he needed to work on, he put extra attention to it. And, you know, calves are not easy to build. Now, I remember Bully Ray used to brag about his in TNA.
I saw, yeah, he had some thick fucking calves.
And, you know, I've gotten calves just from all the manual labor that I've done.
And all the walking I've done.
So you build them up over time. But for whatever reason, he struggled to get them to grow, so he got implants. And he's kept them in a box. And just in case you guys are asking, yes, I have seen the calf implants. We literally used to carry them to shows in case a fan wanted to buy them. Yes, you heard that correctly. He kept them in a box in case a fan wanted to buy them. And to my knowledge, I think he eventually got a fan to buy them. I can't remember. But yes, I think we might have sold them. If he hasn't, then obviously. But yeah, and then of course there was you know, Stars and Stripes. And basically that was the team that took over after Scorpio left for ECW. That was when Buff started forming this tag team with Del Wilkes. And they were tag team champions twice.
Did they last longer than a fucking day?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good.
I think these title reigns lasted a good while. With Stars and Stripes, it showed Buff having to work together in another tag team and showing off how talented he is in that regard and being able to adapt and work with another partner and go for the titles. So Stars and Stripes is a really great tag team. And again, they fought some of the top guys in WCW. Even without his dream calf implants, Marcus's popularity with the female audience lands him in a new tag team that fully utilizes his good looks and muscular physique. That team is known as the American Males with Scotty Riggs.
The American Males. The
American Males. American Males. American Males. American Males. American Males. American Males.
Eric Bush is like, damn it, I have to hear this song. It's going to be stuck in my fucking head for the next 2 days.
If you see him coming, better run for cover. Girls, you don't need a weekend lover. American Males. Love that song. I still remember when Buff and I were in Dallas. That was the song we played when he walked to the ring for that Battle Royal when we were live on pay-per-view. And we had the fans singing it. They were singing it. They were doing the trademark clap. They were doing the clap and everything. And the American Males was the most popular tag team Buff was ever in. Because they would walk to the ring wearing the earrings. They had the facial hair. And back then, during this time, only heels had facial hair and earrings. Baby faces never wore those. This is starting around the time of, like, you know, baby faces being allowed to be cool instead of just white meat. So they were kind of in that transition period.
Yeah, I hear you.
And of course, they also become the tag team champions. They only hold the belts once, though. And this is another example of Buff as a tag team wrestler. In fact, I'm going to say something right now. It's a really extreme hot take. You're going to think it's bias, and some of you may not like what I'm about to say right now. But I'm going to say this. And then I'm going to also have a reason. So I'm not just going to glance over this. But this is what I'm convinced of.
What's that?
I believe that Buff Bagwell, Marcus Alexander Bagwell,
yes,
is the greatest tag team wrestler of all time. I strongly believe that. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. I'll clarify it for you, Zach. I see you a little confused. But I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Hear me out. Hear me out. Please. Just hear me out.
Okay.
Now, usually when you guys hear that, I know what's running through your mind. It's the same thing that's running through Zach's mind. You're thinking of all the tag teams that you love so much, right, Zach?
Yes.
You're probably thinking the Hardy Boys.
That's number 1.
You're probably thinking the Dudley Boys.
Number 2.
Probably thinking Edge and Christian.
That's number 3.
Probably thinking Harlem Heat. Probably thinking the Nasty Boys. Probably thinking Too Cool. Probably thinking the Road Warriors. Probably thinking Demolition. You're thinking of all the tag teams that you love. That's not what I'm referring to. Because here's the thing. As great as all those tag teams were, they were only good because they had chemistry with each other. Think about it. The Hardy Boys. Number one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Matt and Jeff had amazing chemistry,
Oh,
didn't
God,
they?
yeah.
One of the greatest tag teams of all time.
Yes.
Worked very well together.
Oh, yeah.
Loved seeing them together.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if Matt teamed with somebody else, did he have the same magic?
Fuck no.
When Jeff teamed with somebody else, did he have the same magic?
No.
Did they recreate the same excitement?
No.
Did Matt have great chemistry with MVP that he had with Jeff Hardy?
Fuck no.
Did he have that chemistry with Bray Wyatt that he had with Jeff Hardy?
No.
Exactly. Dudley Boys. They could only work well with each other. If you put them in another tag team, you wouldn't get as good a match. Edge and Christian, another great example. Yes, Edge was a tag team champion with a bunch of other people. Christian had tag team title reigns with a bunch of other people. But did they really capture the magic and the essence of the Edge and Christian tag team?
No, they didn't.
Did Edge work better with anybody else than he did with Christian? No.
Randy, maybe.
Randy Orton's close.
Randy Orton's maybe 2.
Close. It's close, but
No cigar.
close, no cigar. Or the Road Warriors. Road Warrior Animal, Road Warrior Hawk.
Yeah.
They split up. Hawk tried to team with somebody else in Japan. It wasn't the same.
It wasn't the same.
Animal had that tag title run with Heidenreich in the Ruthless Aggression era. That wasn't a very good team, was it? No, it wasn't. The point is, those teams were only great with each other. As individuals, if you put them in a tag team with somebody else, you wouldn't have as great a team, it wouldn't be as memorable, and it wouldn't draw as much money. Like I said, Edge maybe with Randy Orton. Maybe.
That's a maybe.
That's a maybe.
That's a big maybe.
But that's about it. Meanwhile, Buff recaptured the magic with every person he was in.
I can see that.
Scorpio, Del Wilkes, Scotty Riggs, Scott Steiner, Scott Norton. We'll get to him later. He teams with him. Shane Douglas, who he held the tag titles with the 2000s. Like, Buff Bagwell won 5 tag team titles with 4 different partners and was able to adapt to every team, because every tag team was different. They had tag team moves, tag team names, tag team gear. They had the chemistry. He was able to adapt with anybody. That's why I say he's the best tag team wrestler of all time. Because who else do you know could do that?
No one.
I haven't seen anybody. If you know one, comment below. Please. I welcome it. I welcome discussion. Just don't be dicks about it. But comment below if you got a better answer. But I'm saying he's the best tag team wrestler of all time.
I can see that.
Because he could adapt with anybody. And also, I've seen him do it. One time, we were at a show for Peach State Wrestling Alliance here in Georgia. It's one of the many Georgia indie promotions in the state. And Buff was in a tag match with 3 indie guys. One was his partner. The other 2 were his opponents. I'm in the back with Buff because we're getting ready for the show. Now, Buff at the time still had a bad leg, but he had a knee brace. And as long as he had the knee brace on, he could move without a crutch and work in the ring. And because Buff had such great psychology, he could work the match despite the limited mobility in his leg. It wasn't as noticeable to the untrained eye. But he's in the back going over the match with these 3 guys. He's telling them exactly what to do. He's saying, here's what we're going to do. Then you're going to tag out here. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to tag out there. Boom, boom, boom. You guys do this, then tag me back in. And he's giving them instructions. And here's how good of a guy Buff is to go over a match with. He says, if at any point talking to you, if you don't understand something, say something. Because Buff would rather repeat it to you in the back 50 times than have you go out to the ring, not know what the fuck you're doing, and make both y'all look stupid. Buff does not want to look stupid in a ring. So if he has to hammer it into your brain 1,500 times for you to understand exactly what the fuck you're supposed to do out there, he'll do it. And again, because Buff is a veteran, because Buff is a legend, these 3 indie guys, what do you think they're doing?
They're learning from Buff.
They're listening.
Listening.
They're following. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If you have any questions, ask them. If you don't, then I assume you know what you're doing. And if you fuck up out there, we're going to have a problem when we come back here. So if you have a question, say it. Let's make sure before we go through that curtain that everybody knows what the fuck they're supposed to do. I watched them go over this whole match, go out to the ring, and perform it perfectly. Exactly what Buff told them to do, these guys did. So naturally, what do you think Buff tells the promoter? He puts those 3 guys over to the promoter. These are your best workers right here. They look good, so that means they're going to get booked more. Their reputation goes up because they have the endorsement of a legend. Regardless of how you feel about Buff, that man is a legend. And he gets treated with that respect in locker rooms. Because if you're not going to show him the proper respect,
Fuck you.
Fuck you. But also, good luck getting booked again.
That's true as well.
So that's why I say Buff is the greatest tag team wrestler of all time. Because he could have tag team magic with anyone he tagged with. It didn't matter. He was able to recreate the magic with anybody. And I don't know any other wrestler that's been able to do that. Like I said, there were better tag teams.
Oh, God, yeah.
I'm not saying that the American Male, Stars and Stripes, and him and Scorpio are better than those other teams. I'm not. Hardys, Dudleys, Edge and Christian, they're on a whole other level.
Yeah, this what we...
I don't deny that. But I'm saying if you split them up and put them with other people, you wouldn't be able to recreate the magic. And the only person that even came close, as Zach said, was Edge and Randy Orton. That's the only one that even came close. But even that was just a tag team of convenience for a DX feud. That tag team didn't have a lot of staying power. So I'm saying Buff is the greatest tag team wrestler of all time because he made history in multiple different tag teams.
That is true.
Yeah, so they were over with the female audience, the American males, which was the goal Eric Bischoff wanted because he understood looks were important back in the 90s. The male audience, on the other hand, hated the American males. As I mentioned, the guys hated them because their wives and girlfriends were swooning over them, and they were jelly.
With the jelly?
Very jelly.
Very jelly?
Very, very jelly.
Very, very, very jelly.
So jelly.
Jelly.
They were jelly and needed peanut butter. So... But yeah, looks were important because that's, again, a big thing in the 90s. It mattered how the wrestlers looked. That's why Buff was obsessed with being in the gym and tanning and going out to the ring. Because back then, men wanted to look like men. A wrestler wanted to look like a wrestler. They didn't want to look like big fat slobs. They didn't want to look like skinny twigs. They didn't want to look pale. They didn't want to go out there having to wear a shirt because you got nothing to show. You rarely saw a wrestler walk to the ring with a shirt on, unless they were coming out for a promo early in the show and they wanted to show off like merch and stuff. But when they walked out to the ring to wrestle, they showed off the upper body because they had the body and the definition.
Or they come out with a shirt on, then take the shirt off.
Exactly. They were all about their look because they wanted wrestlers to look like wrestlers. That's why the wrestling was so popular, because all the guys look big and larger than life. You didn't want to see a guy that's like, oh, he looks like me. I don't want a guy who looks like me.
And when they come down to the ring, we're coming down to the ring, standing at 6'3", 245 pounds. They're 6'3" and 240 pounds. They may look big on TV, but in real life, holy shit.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, you had the big muscular guys were over.
Yeah,
and it was about looking good. It wasn't about the acrobatics and the bullshit and all the stuff you see today where half of them look like meth heads. You know,
it's fucking horrible. I mean, they look skinnier than me.
It's
and
sad.
I'm a bag of skin and fucking bones.
Exactly.
Really.
Now, he later gets married to a woman named Erica, and that doesn't last long.
What did that last, like a year?
I guess.
I don't know.
Here's how long it lasted. I don't even remember him telling me about Erica.
Never mind.
I never met Erica, never heard of Erica. This is the first I've heard of Erica.
Erica.
Didn't know her. But he later meets his third wife, Judy Cook.
Vinny?
Yeah?
Could you date another woman that had your mom's name?
That'd be tough. That would be tough. Like, if I fell in love with a woman and found out her name was Susan, I'd be like, no. I'd be like, oh, God, no.
If I fell in love with a woman named Karen, oh, my God. And speaking of which, everybody's getting mad at these Karens on YouTube. Hold on. Can I say something real quick? My mom's name is Karen, but she's not a fucking Karen. That's all I have to say.
She will be if Trump gets reelected. Now, he made her the number one Judy, even though she said Mark always comes first.
Okay. I had to think for a second.
It's not a sexual thing.
Oh, oops.
No, what he's saying is that, you know, obviously there's two Judys. There's Judy Bagwell, the mother, and Judy Bagwell, the wife.
Yeah.
Obviously, when they got married, he said he made me the number one Judy in his life. But everybody knows Marcus comes first. What he means is that Marcus puts his needs in front of everybody else's.
Okay, that's
So
what
it's like he's basically saying Mark loves himself more than he loved her.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And she kind of laughs jokingly when she says that.
Yeah, okay.
Because Mark would probably tell you, yeah, well, it's kind of like that. But so that's what he said by Mark always comes first. It was not a sexual joke. Yes, so he meets this woman, Judy. Now, I have met Judy. I have. Because for a period of time, I don't know if this still happens today, but I know for a period of time, Judy would come by the house regularly. Despite the fact they're not married anymore, Judy would come by the house, and she would also bring Buff his mail. Because sometimes Buff still had mail going to the address at the house they lived in together, because she still lives in that house. So she would take the mail that would go to Buff, and instead of forwarding it through the mail, she would just drive to the house and give it to him. And also sometimes, I shit you not, she would shave Marcus's back. Now you're going to hear a funnier story with the other Judy later, but we're not going to get to that. But I'm just going to say, there have been times I've shown up to the house, and Judy has been there shaving his back. And I've sometimes had to shave the back of Buff's neck. And he would teach me how to do it, like go down and out, like a perfect V shape in the back. So she would shave his back. So that way his back would be smooth and hairless for the show the next day. But yeah, they were talking a little bit at the house, and Judy would be coming out of the bathroom. Hey, Vinny. Hey, Judy. So I've met Judy a few times. So I'm very familiar with Judy Cook. And I feel comfortable calling her Judy Cook because that's her name on Facebook. So I don't think I am crossing any lines by saying her last name. Having won multiple tag team championships, Marcus takes the lead to join one of WCW's most legendary factions, the NWO. Nash reached out to him about joining the NWO, and Mark says yes. He turns on Scotty, and the rest is history, as he is renamed Buff Bagwell. Tanya said she thought they'd get back together, but she knew he would live that character 24/7, and there'd be no chance of things working out.
Did that make sense at all to you?
I mean, it does, only because I understand in wrestling, a lot of times wrestlers, they live their gimmicks 24/7 sometimes. Although back in the day, it was because they were protecting kayfabe. Buff, as I mentioned before, was very big on protecting his image. That's why, like I said, he used to dye his hair. He would do all these things because he was all about being buff and having the fans see Buff Bagwell, which the name idea actually came from Nick Patrick. Because they were flying on the planes, he was still Marcus Bagwell.
Yeah, that's right.
They were trying to come up with a new name, and they said, how about Buff Bagwell? And it just rang off. Now, for a period of time, it was Marcus Buff Bagwell for a while. Then eventually they dropped the Marcus, and he was just Buff Bagwell. He's buff, he's the stuff, and the girls just can't get enough. He's in a tag team with Scott Norton, and they're called Vicious and Delicious was the name of their team. Scott Norton was, of course, the Vicious. Buff, of course, was the Delicious because of his looks.
Who's Scott Norton? I looked him up. I'm going like, holy shit. That dude, like what John said, was a corn-fed motherfucker. That was a big dude.
He was a big, bad motherfucker. In New Japan, he was a big, bad motherfucker. Not that he wasn't a bad motherfucker in WCW, but he was a badder motherfucker in New Japan.
He seems like a really nice guy.
He is, actually.
Is he? Have you met him?
We interviewed him on the Buff and Boochcast.
Okay, so is he that in real life?
Well, yeah, obviously. You know.
I always brag to my friends. It's like, who's the biggest wrestler you ever met? And I was like, I kind of lie at the show I was with you. It's like, I met a wrestler who was over 7 foot and 300-something pounds. Really? Yeah, I have to go and look up.
Yeah.
That's just a fib I tell.
Yeah, exactly. So that was when he decided to join the NWO. He turned on Scotty Riggs. They had a match that sold out. And here's the best part.
What's that?
When he had the one-on-one match with Scotty,
Yeah.
before the match, they came up with Buff's new finisher for that match. Now, there's a move you see a lot in wrestling today. You see many guys do it. Seth Rollins has done it. Bobby Roode has done it. Montez Ford has done it. Multiple wrestlers have done it. It's a move called the blockbuster. Now, the blockbuster, it's where someone jumps off the top rope, grabs the guy's head, and they kind of flip. Like they dive down, grab the head, flip over. It's a blockbuster.
Yeah.
Buff and Scotty Riggs invented the blockbuster. They actually practiced it in a hotel room a few nights before the event. Like, he would jump off and try to do a blockbuster under the bed or whatever. And they would practice it. So the first time Buff ever does the blockbuster was at Sold Out the year he went one-on-one with Scotty Riggs. Because he turned on him. They were now enemies. And Buff is now joining the NWO. And he's part of the NWO with Hogan, with Hall, with Nash, with Conan, with Scott Steiner. Oh, and this is where he's really coming into his own with the Buff Bagwell gimmick. And this is definitely the Buff that I remember watching as a kid. Because him and Scott Steiner were the highlight of Nitro. Like, Steiner would come out, you know, the pose and everything, and Buff was his hype man. Like his
Were they heels or faces?
They were heels.
Okay.
It's NWO. They were heels.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Even though they were cheered. You always got like, they're supposed to be bad, I think Eric Bischoff, they're supposed to be bad guys, but the crowd actually liked them.
Yes.
I was
Like Steiner would come out and Buff would get on the mic and talk for a bit.
I remember back in school with all the NWO shirts on. I was like, I didn't have one, but I definitely remember 1 out of 5, 6 kids always had an NWO shirt on or a Sting shirt.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, he would go out there and, Buff would hype up the crowd, then give the microphone to Steiner, and then Scott would cut his promos and just go off the rails. And then eventually, they led to a breakup between them and everything else, and Buff went solo and showed off what he could do.
Did Scott Steiner and Buff Bagwell ever go at it in WCW?
Yes.
Okay.
He later starts a company called The Real Buff Inc., which is still a thing.
Is it really?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
He hires the whole family, pays them a salary to work for him. Judy would take him to the airport, make sure the house was clean, and manage his bills. Now, some of you might have thought I said a different word, but we'll get to that in just a moment. This was definitely true. Like you said, he had everybody working for him and paid everybody. Like Judy.
Off his salary from WCW.
Yeah. So the money he made from WCW, he would pay people on his staff to work for him. He brought the family in. This is him taking care of the family, as we mentioned before. He paid the bills. He was now the rich man, family. Like back in the day, his mom and dad were rich. Now Buff is rich. And they're working for him. That's how they're getting the salary. Like Judy would take him to the airport, which is something that I did when I worked for Buff for a period of time. I used to be the one to take him to the airport. And sometimes I had to take him in the afternoon. Sometimes I took him in the evening. Sometimes I took him like early in the goddamn morning. But he never missed a flight when I took him. Never once. Even when people thought, dude, it's traffic. You're not going to make it. I'm like, oh, I'll make it. I'll make it. By some miracle, I would always make it.
Every time I got on a plane, it was always early in the morning. Ooh, that sucked.
In fact, I remember one time we almost missed a flight, but I was able to pull it off.
You pulled it out of your ass?
Pulled it out of my ass.
There you go.
Here's what happened. At the time I was helping out Buff, I was also working in a mattress store. Yeah. I was working in a mattress store. Now, I'll give a little backstory on this. As you guys know, I've talked a lot about Voldemort on this show. In addition to running a wrestling company, Voldemort also ran a mattress store. And for years, he would try to get me to work for him in his mattress store. And for years, I told him no. Now, I would always say it's because I had a good thing going in retail because I was working at Lowe's. The reality was I didn't want to work in his mattress store because I knew there would be payment issues. It's like, dude, you can't even pay me on time for a wrestling show. I'm supposed to believe I'm going to get paid for a mattress store. But eventually, he convinced me to go in there. Actually, no, let me rewind that. Buff convinced me to go in there because he thought it would be good for the team if I helped out at the mattress store. So I went and worked at the mattress store. So I'm leaving the mattress store to go pick up Buff. I'm supposed to be there at 5:15. And we're supposed to be leaving the house at 5:45 to go to the airport. And if we leave at 5:45, we'll make it on time. I show up at 5:15 to the house. Buff is not there. I'm calling him. I'm not getting an answer. All of a sudden, I see a pickup truck pull up in the driveway. It is the owner of a restaurant in Marietta. Because Buff was so intoxicated, he could not drive his car. So the owner of the restaurant drove his car. So Buff pulls up. This is the one time I yelled at Buff. The one time I screamed at him. Because he wasn't answering his phone, right? So I walk up to the truck and I go, "Where the hell have you been?" And Buff goes, "What? We got to go to the airport." This is what Buff does. Watch. It goes like this. Fuck!
I can see him doing that.
He realizes, oh shit, we gotta go to the fucking airport. So I get him out of the truck, and again, he's got the bad knee. So I have to slowly walk him up this ramp to the house. Because one of those houses, you go out the front door, and then there's like a little bit of a spiral pathway. So I gotta walk up this spiral pathway, and we're walking slowly, because again, he can't move that knee very well. So I'm walking him, then I guide him up the stairs so he can grab his shit. We get in the car, we haul ass to the fucking airport, and we drop him off. That's the one bad airport experience that I had. We were almost late. It's a true story. So she also helped him keep the house clean, as I mentioned before. Buff's house was always clean. There's times where I've been over there and we've had to clean the house. So he's very big on having a clean house. And, managing his bills and making sure everything's paid on time and everything else, because Buff doesn't want to get in trouble. Now, Slick, who's a friend of his, comes to the house to visit. And Mark is bent over naked in a tub, and his mom is behind him with the skin of his dick pulled up behind his balls, and she's shaving his balls for him. He's on all fours, and he says, "Hey, buddy, what's up?" Even Judy, as he's shaving his balls, goes, "Hey, how you been doing? Is everything okay?" And he said,
no, and got the hell out of there.
And he walks away and goes like, what the fuck is going on?
Now I've seen it all. You people are sick. Now, this is another story I was never told.
I heard that. I was like, what the fuck?
And that's what I meant by I thought you guys thought I said something different instead of managing his bills instead of like managing his balls or whatever. Because he shaved his balls. Oh my God.
Can't you do that yourself? Apparently not.
Here's the thing. Even if you couldn't do it yourself, of all the people to ask,
You got your mom?
why?
You're buffed as stuff fucking Bagwell. Can you get some hot ass bra to do it for you? Apparently not. Mobbing went a little too far on this one, man.
I don't even want my mother to see my balls, let alone shave them. Fuck, dude. Oh my God. And by the way, I know what some of you are going to ask. I'm going to say this right now. No. I never shaved his balls. Not one goddamn time.
I wasn't going to ask you that.
No, there's going to be some fans that are thinking, oh, Vinny, you probably shaved his balls. No, I did not. Of all the things I've done for Buff, that's probably the one thing I never did.
Never did.
Although there was one time when there was an all fours issue because he was trying to blow dry his hair. And for some reason, he was bent over while he was doing it. I guess to look in this mirror or whatever. And again, he has a bad leg. So I had to hold him steady. So basically, Buff is bent over like this, blow drying his hair, right? I had to get behind him like this to hold him so he doesn't fall.
If I could only be there to take a picture.
Oh.
If I took a picture.
Here's the best part.
What?
The housekeeper walked in.
And
she fucking sees this. And she's like, oh my God.
Was there an awkward moment of silence?
Yes.
He was like, what the fuck are you doing?
And again, Buff's just like, hey, darling. Because Buff's a Southern guy, so he used to call a lot of women darling. That's a Southern thing.
That's the Southern thing. I do it all the time.
So he'd be like, hey, darling, or hey, baby girl, or whatever. He would say it to everybody, or every female, I should say. Let me clarify that. Because I had to hold him steady because, again, he has a bad knee, he'd fall over. So I got to make sure he doesn't fucking fall over. So I'm standing behind him, grabbing his hips. And for a period of time, she thought we were gay. And she told me, she goes, yeah, the housekeeper thought we were gay. I was like, what the fuck? And we just started laughing about it because of how ridiculous it sounded. But just this whole awkward situation.
If I walked in and saw you doing it, I would laugh and take a picture, go like, click.
But I'm just saying, I never shaved his balls. But some people have asked me, well, Vinny, if he had asked you to shave his balls, would you have done it? Probably. I need the money.
You're a braver man than me.
Hey, I was paying rent with the money Buff was paying me at the time, okay? And he even says towards the end of this, it's amazing what you'll do when your house is on the line. Well, my house wasn't on the line, but me having a place to stay was on the line. It's amazing what you will do. So, yeah, I probably would have if he asked me to.
That's true.
But I had to be getting paid for it. I would not shave his balls for free. Free ain't happening.
As soon as I heard that, like, here, Vinny, here's somebody shave my balls, is exactly what I would do. I was like, you have fun.
All right.
Shit. Nah, I'm good.
No, I can shave my own balls.
I can shave my own balls, too. Yeah. Okay, moving on.
Yes.
Move on.
Using his newfound stardom to pursue other avenues in entertainment, Marcus takes leading roles in a number of straight-to-video action movies, like The Day of the Warrior, Lethal Ladies Return to Savage Beach, Terror Act, and 4 to Go.
B movies.
Yes, they were B movies. Now, Day of the Warrior, you know, he had like the hairdress and everything. By the way, we did a virtual signing. We actually sold the headdress from the Day of the Warrior set. And I actually put the headdress on and started doing a war dance. Like, and everybody was, Marcus is laughing. The other guy that was with us, I won't mention his name right now, but I will later, was there too. And he's uncomfortable because the other guy's a bit of a libtard. Not Mark, the other guy. Bit of a libtard, this guy. So he was a little uncomfortable. But I'm just going, I'm just, and then I look in the camera and I go, how much would you buy for this? Or how jealous are you right now? Just fucking around, like, just having fun.
I hear you.
I'm just being a goofball. Buff's laughing hysterically. The libtard's uncomfortable because he's worried we're going to get canceled. I'm like, fuck you. It's comedy. And then 4 to Go was a movie he did with Dean Cain.
where Buff's character, his character in the movie, was a child molester. And they're like breaking out of prison, escaping, and at one point, Dean Cain kills Buff's character. I think at one point he gets his his privates ripped off or whatever. But again, his character was a pedophile, so
fuck him.
We supported that.
Yes, we do.
Yes, but he also was in an episode of Charmed.
Was he really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
There was an episode of Charmed where it was a wrestling-themed episode, and Buff was in there. He actually has in a frame the yellow tights he wore in the episode. He played a different wrestler, but it was one of those things where it was a wrestling-themed episode. Like the girls were going to a wrestling match. There was some wrestling demon kind of thing, and Buff Bagwell played one of the wrestlers that was in that episode.
He got to go see a young Rose McGowan before
Yes.
she went fucking nuts. Lucky bastard.
And a young Alyssa Milano before she lost her fucking shit.
And a young Tara Hatcher. That was her name? Was the third one?
Think Terry Hatcher was it?
Terry. Yeah, I like Terry Hatcher, man.
Was it Terry Hatcher?
I think it was Terry Hatcher, yeah. And people go, why'd you watch Charm? Because, they were hot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
They were
Some people
hot.
liked
I
it.
was like, that's why I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was for the action, but she was fucking hot.
Still riding high as a member of the NWO, in April of 1998, a routine match on WCW Thunder goes dangerously wrong. Rick Steiner goes for his top rope bulldog, and he misses him, so when he comes down, Buff's neck hits his back and jerks it up really fast and bruised his spinal cord and caused temporary paralysis.
Now, that was a botch, right? Or was that an accident? Was that Rick's fault or was it just a complete fucking oops?
It was a complete clusterfuck. No, Rick Steiner was coming off and he jumped too high. He was like he was going to miss Buff's head. So I think Buff tried to lean forward a little bit so he could catch up to him because he wanted to look stupid on TV. And they overshot. So when both of them went down, Buff hit Rick's back and jerked his neck.
So it was an accident.
Yes.
Okay.
Nobody was sloppy and reckless in this. Or if they were, it was not like in a way they could have
I
injured
know
somebody.
how we feel about Rick Steiner, but this is him in the ring. I don't think he went intentionally to go hurt Buff.
No, he would.
It was just a horrible accident.
But yeah, and so this match was a tag match with Vicious and Delicious, and they were facing the team of Rick Steiner and Lex Luger. That was the tag team there. So they were facing them in a tag match, and that's when this moment went horribly wrong. And at the peak of his wrestling career, Buff Bagwell suffers an in-ring accident that leaves him with a broken neck and an uncertain future. Because for a period of time, he thought he was legit paralyzed, like he was never going to move. Now, after the swelling in his spine went down, he was able to move again and got 2 plates and 8 screws in his neck. Within 3 months, he was back on TV to thank the fans for their well wishes, and then within 10 months, he was fully rehabbed and back in the ring as Scott Steiner's manager. So this is when he becomes the hype man for Scott Steiner. Because before this, he was in Vicious and Delicious with Scott Norton. Again, Buff and another tag team that was working successfully and could have very well become WCW Tag Team Champions if this hadn't happened. So they're bringing him back as a manager for Scott Steiner. And that's when they start going into their antics and their fun shit that I remember. And again, he was rehabbing his neck. And like the doctor told him, sit up. He goes, I can't move. He goes, yes, you can. Apparently, when your spinal cord is bruised, it causes that temporary paralysis. That's why you think you're paralyzed. But once that swelling goes down, you're able to move again. So he wasn't paralyzed, but his neck was broken. And it is possible to have a broken neck and not be paralyzed. So Buff suffered a serious neck injury, and that neck injury really derailed his career. Like, God only knows what would have happened if he never broke his neck. Returning to the spotlight, Buff turns to drugs to endure the pain that comes with a wrestling lifestyle. He's taking Vicodin and his biggest nemesis, Somas. While other wrestlers were out partying, he'd be in his room with his pills, having a good time.
I mean, what these pain pills do is not make you go, hey, it makes you go, chunk. That's what you do. You don't want to move. You become like a sack of fucking potatoes. Buff stands 2 sacks of potatoes because the guy was so fucking big.
Well, yes, and that was the thing. He had his pills always regimented. Like I said before, like they timed their highs and everything. He was regimented with his pills. He made sure they were organized. He knew what he was going to take, what he wasn't going to take, all the different type of pills he had. Now, of course, Vicodin. I've never taken Somas. I have taken Vicodin. Dear God, that's amazing. I was on cloud fucking 9 on Vicodin. I know why you need a prescription for those. I would become a Vicodin pill addict because that thing takes away whatever misery you have. That's not only a cure for pain, it's a cure for depression.
Takes the pain away.
Yes. Another big thing was Xanax because he needed Xanax to sleep. Now, back when we were filming the Change or Die series, We had one time when I picked him up, he had to stop at a pharmacy to get a Xanax. So we're hustling to the pharmacy, trying to get through the traffic and everything. We get to the pharmacy, it's closed. And Buff is freaking the fuck out, bro. He's out of it. Like, he's now scared. You know how they said sometimes Buff, without his pills or whatever, he'd be like twitching?
Yeah.
They talk about the twitching. I saw the twitching. Dear God. And at one point, we went out to dinner. We would go to Longhorn. And I go to the bathroom. Buff orders everything because he knows what I'm going to get. I sit down. I get my soda. All of a sudden, I see a beer hit the table. So I look at Buff, and I don't say nothing to him. But I'm looking at him like, what the fuck? Now, I don't say what the fuck, but I'm giving him the what the fuck look, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, again, we're on Change or Die. Before Change or Die, I never judged Buff for what he ate or drank. But now that he's on Change or Die, if he gets caught with this, he's in trouble. I'm looking at him like, what the fuck? And he goes, just let me have this one. I'm freaking out right now. I won't do it again. Just let me have this one. And I'm like, okay. I know what to do. I'm frozen in time here. And this was a real dilemma for me. Because one of the things that Buff talked about when he said his parents worked for him. So when you work for somebody, it's hard to tell them, don't do this, don't do that. It's hard to convince them they have a problem. So I'm working for Buff. So I'm sitting here freaking out because I don't know what to say. And I didn't want to say anything because I remember being told if Buff got caught on alcohol or on the pills, one time they were going to kick him out of the crib. I heard one time he's out. I didn't hear tell us and we'll stage an intervention or tell us and we'll let him off with a warning. Like, no, if he messes up once, he's out. That's the words that were said to me. And I didn't want Buff to get kicked out of that house. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew if Buff got kicked out of the accountability crib, if he got thrown off a Change or Die, there is no fucking way he would have got clean if he got kicked to the curb. But if he stayed in the house, he at least had a fighting chance despite this relapse that's happening in front of me. So it wasn't like I was okay with this behavior. I just didn't want him to get kicked out of the house. I didn't know who to turn to. So then later that night, he has that one drink. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's the one drink and he's going to be done. It wasn't. But at the time, I was not told that there was an intervention rehab option. I was just told one strike, he's out. And I didn't want him to get kicked out. I didn't want to rat out Buff because I didn't want to be the best friend that stabbed him in the back. So I was in a real dilemma here. But here's really what I want to talk. So we get through this ordeal. We get back to his house. And we're supposed to be going to sleep because he's got to get up the next day to go to a flight. Buff Bagwell, his knee was so bad, he was on 2 crutches now instead of 1. He is standing in his kitchen, completely naked, with just the crutches. And he had his headphones on. He was on the phone. We're getting everything organized. Buff's just standing there, normal, checking his messages. He's calmed down somewhat. And I said, is there anything else you need from me? He said, no, because I'm about to go to sleep. I got to be up to take him to the airport. So I definitely got to get some sleep because I got to be awake to drive him. So I go to bed. I got about maybe 3 hours sleep tops. It was like a power nap. 3 hours later, I wake up. I go into the kitchen. He's still there.
Shitting me.
He is still standing there, naked on the crutches and the blood. And I walk around the front, and he looked like he was possessed by a demon. Like, he's twitching. His eyes are like 3/4 shut, like he's squinting, like he can barely stay awake. And this is what I see him doing. All right? This is what you see. I'm like, pack a bag, get on a plane, I gotta catch a flight, I need a shower, the show's in an hour. That's all I'm seeing. And I'm just standing there in fucking shock. Some of the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. So finally, I just go, Buff. And he goes, hey, hey, buddy, what's up? I'm like, dude, you know we got to get to the airport. He's like, oh, yeah, no problem, man. Just, I'll just go get the car ready, and I'm going to go catch a shower. I'll be good. And he just takes the crutches and goes in the bathroom. And I was just like, holy shit. And again, I want to say something, but I'm afraid he's going to get kicked out of the house or have the Change or Die team sever all ties with him. Because I knew if that happened, 2 things were guaranteed. 1, Buff would have never gotten clean, and 2, he would have blamed me for it. Now, today, when you talk to Buff, he takes personal accountability for every mistake he's ever made. He owns it, he tells a great story, and he's an inspiration. But while he was in the thick of it, I guarantee you I would have got blamed. If I had known that there was an option to stage an intervention or get him some help or let him off with a warning, maybe I would have said something. But I was told 1 strike, done. And that's the reason why. I did not want him to get kicked off that show, kicked out of that house, because I knew if he did, he would have never got clean. I just wanted to give him a fighting chance. chance.
I understand that. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that.
Whether I ratted him out or not, I was getting fucked. It's just a matter of did I want to get fucked in the ass or fucked in the face. Those are my choices. I'm either a traitor or I'm an enabler. There was no in between. Do I piss off Buff Bagwell? Do I piss off the people at Change or Die? There was no in between with this.
You had no clue what to do.
I had no clue what to do, and all I knew was I didn't want Buff to get kicked out of that house.
You went with the flow.
I went with the flow.
There you go.
With the success of Buff's return to WCW, a new angle is born as Marcus's mother, Judy, becomes a part of the storyline. She became good friends with Rick Steiner, and he pitches the idea of bringing her on camera to try and talk some sense into Buff. She slapped him and got a huge pop. He goes to punch her, she ducks, and she slaps him again. Eventually, the mother and son reunite and end up in a feud with Positively Canyon, culminating in the infamous Judy Bagwell on a forklift match. Because in Canyon's words, they couldn't find a pole that would hold that big fat battle axe. Yes, Judy Bagwell became part of WCW talent. Vince Russo was booking WCW around this time, and he was very, very big on doing on-a-pole matches. Anytime you saw an on-a-pole match in WCW or WWE Attitude Era, most of the time it was Russo. He was do like the Viagra on a pole, a pink slip on a pole, or
car keys on a pole, this on a fucking pole, that on a fucking pole.
Anything blank on a pole. Chances are it was Russo involved. And here's the thing about Buff and Judy. They would shoot on each other in the ring. Buff would say, hey, listen here, Judy. Don't you forget who pays the bills. That was a shoot because Buff was the one.
What would she say to him?
She would say, you're not too old for me to whoop your ass.
Slap hands.
Which, again, these were both of them were shooting because Buff was true. Buff Bagwell paid the bills because all the family worked for him. But Judy said, I don't care how old you are, as your mother, I will still whoop your ass. Because remember, Judy was a badass. She had the guys in the lumberyard standing at attention. Fired you if you didn't have a pen. Judy Bagwell did not fuck around. She was not afraid to get in someone's face. She was not afraid to be confrontational. In fact, her and Rick Steiner at one point were the tag team champions.
Okay.
And the reason was because Buff and Rick were booked in a tag title match, and Buff turned on Rick. But Rick still won the match. He got to hold both belts. So Judy Bagwell was a WCW tag team champion with Rick Steiner. And then eventually they had to find a different partner. But for a while, Judy was the one. And they had great storylines. And Judy, as I mentioned before, was incredible in the ring. Great to see her. After Judy's run comes to an end, WCW is bought by their competition, the World Wrestling Federation. As Vince McMahon only brings some WCW wrestlers onto his roster, Buff Bagwell makes the cut. So Buff is one of the guys they bring in. Now, Buff comes on and takes a massive pay cut, which obviously most wrestlers don't want to do, because a lot of wrestlers, they just sat out the remainder of their contracts. That's why they didn't show up till later on. Like guys like Goldberg, Scott Steiner, the NWO, Hogan, Hall, and Nash. A lot of those guys came in like 2002, 2003, because they waited for their contracts to expire. They had time to sit at home, so they just sat at home, which sucked, because if they could have been part of the invasion, it would have been much better than what we got. But anyway, my point is, Buff Bagwell makes the cut. So he takes a massive pay cut because he wants to show he's a team player. I want to show I want to be part of the roster.
Yeah, that makes sense right there.
So he comes on with all the other guys that we saw. The Sean Stasiak, Mark Jindrak, Sugar Shane Helms, Diamond Dallas Page, Booker T. A lot of the guys that were coming in from WCW. In fact, Vince was mentioning names in the ring while he was talking about I purchased WCW. I grabbed my competition by the throat. Remember that promo?
Yeah.
And then Shane later came out to say, I now own
WCW.
WCW.
It does say McMahon, but it says Shane McMahon. And then the look on Vince's face is like, you little shit.
No, it was what the fuck.
Yeah, what the fuck.
The you little shit wasn't until next week.
Yeah.
It was, oh my God, you can't be serious. What the fuck? But no, so he was mentioning different names of wrestlers. At one point he said Buff Bagwell, and the crowd popped. And then he said Buff Bagwell, and he put a thumbs up, and the crowd chanted again. Like, yes, we want Buff Bagwell. So, yeah, fuck you to anyone who said Buff Bagwell wasn't over. You can suck my massive 12-inch cock. Before making his debut, Marcus attends a training session with fellow wrestler Shane Helms.
Oh, shit.
Which erupts into a heated confrontation. Shane says, oh, look, Bagwell made it on time today. We've already talked about that. Buff says, wow, you had a great day today, brother. Shane says, well, I'm hurt. Buff says, oh, I know, yeah, you're always hurt. And Shane goes, well, at least I'm not a drug addict. And then Buff says, look, bro, we got two ways to go here. We can just drop this and let it go, or I can just slap your teeth down your fucking throat. So basically, they were kind of being sarcastic with each other But then Helms crossed the line with the drug addict thing. So now Buff isn't laughing anymore. So he says, you want to drop this or do you want me to slap the shit out of you? And that's the thing about Buff in some situations is Buff knew how to escalate and de-escalate any situation. Buff is one of those people that if he can de-escalate a problem, he will. I've learned that about him. Like when he had the feud with Scott Steiner, they were shooting on each other in the ring verbally. I mean, they had the finish of that segment where Steiner hit the belly to belly and Steiner recliner. That was scripted. But what they were saying on the mic, they were shooting. Like, you know, ever since Buff's been getting back in the gym, maybe Scotty's just a little bit jealous. And Scotty's like, as good as you look, you will always be second best next to me. Like, so they were shooting. They were fucking going for it. And then Buff's trying to say, you know what? Let's just calm down here. Our emotions are getting the better of us. And then they shake hands, give a hug, and then belly to belly. But I've also seen him do it with Butterbean when they were on Change or Die. And I can talk about this because this footage came out. They've released this footage, so I'm not leaking anything that's a spoiler. But at one point, Buff gets into an altercation with Butterbean in the Change or Die house. And Butterbean's like, you know, you keep fucking with me, I'm gonna knock your teeth out. And Buff's like, I ain't fucking scared of you, Butter fucking Bean. Like, you wanna go, motherfucker?
Buff, I love you, but careful with those words against Butterbean.
No, they were ready to go. Buff's like, come on, big man, get out the chair. And Butterbean's like, I will beat you. And he gets out. You have to bear in mind, this is the early stages of when they were in the house. And Butterbean literally would walk on crutches, but he would be like this.
Yeah.
He was hunched over because of his back. Like now, he walks upright again. Yeah. So even though Butterbean could probably still knock Bagwell out if he got close enough, the fact he was hunched over, it gave Bagwell a good running start if they got in a fight. But anyway, Buff's able to de-escalate the problem because they realize shit's getting too heated, and then they decide to go for a fist bump. Butterbean goes for a fist bump, but he punches his hand, and then Bagwell goes, ah. He goes, now I'm glad I didn't fight him. And that was the thing. That was their one and only altercation. Buff and Butterbean have been cool ever since.
I remember Butterbean.
Like we saw Butterbean at a convention a few months back, and everything was cool. So Buff and Butterbean are friends now. They just had that one incident in the house. And then even he and I had an argument one time over the phone because there was an incident with a package that I couldn't remember because I knew I sent one package out and Voldemort was supposed to send another package out. But I got confused because it was the same initials on the package. So he did it in the package. I'm like, pretty sure that was Voldemort. He goes, oh, you're saying it was Voldemort? And he's like yelling on the phone about how this isn't organized. And I'm sitting going, wait a minute. I think now I remember it might be that place. And he starts yelling at me again. And he's like, how do you not know? I'm like, well, I don't check the computer. He goes, aren't you my manager? I'm supposed to check the computer? I'm like, I am your manager, but you told me you didn't want me to worry about that. You said right now you wanted to start me off on running errands, and eventually we work my way up to organizing your website. That's what he said. He said, we're going to start you off here just running errands, and then at a certain point, we'll have you run the website. So because I wasn't in charge of the website, no, I didn't look at your website. You handed me a form, and I sent it out, which I did. But he starts yelling at me like, are you supposed to be my manager and you can't look at this stuff? Why can't you remember any of this stuff? And he just starts yelling and he's egging me on. I'm trying to talk to him, but he just keeps cutting me off and he's screaming at me. So finally, I just snapped. Like, how is it you can't remember all this stuff? And I finally just went, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a giant fuck up. You ever thought of that? And the phone goes silent. And I'm thinking, what the fuck did I just do?
You're fired.
I expected that.
Recursion of Vince McMahon.
But then Buff just went, you know what? Let's just calm down here. We're both a little worked up. Let's take a deep breath, and we'll talk when I get back, okay? And I said, all right, sounds good. He goes, okay, buddy. I'll talk to you soon. I said, all right. He said, I love you, man. I love you too. Bye. Click, click. That was the end of that conversation. A few days later, he flies back to Georgia. He and I have a talk. And he then opened up the laptop and said, now we're going to get you on my website. And he apologized because he said, you're right. I didn't give you access to the website yet. But now I am giving you the access to the website. So now this is your responsibility. Okay? I said, yes, sir. And we were on the same page ever since. So following an exchange of insults, Marcus Bagwell threatens fellow wrestler Shane Helms with physical violence. Shane says, take your best shot. And before he can even get the word shot out, he slaps him with the Bagwell slap, which was taught to him by his father to instantly assert dominance. Shane rolled into the corner, and as Buff walked away, Shane pulls out a frozen water bottle and cracks him in the back of the head with it. Blood is gushing out of the back of his head. Buff doesn't tell anybody, goes to his own doctor. The doctor fixes it, and he doesn't take any time off from the road. He has 25 staples in his head the night he wrestles Booker T. He used a black Sharpie to cover up the staples so no one saw it. And apparently, Shane was freaking out because he didn't expect Buff to, get hurt that badly. He was just mad that he slapped him.
Then you had to come up and sneak from behind him, hit him in the back of the head. Fuck you.
Yeah, that was kind of a dick move.
That was a coward fucking move, you motherfucker, you.
So he begged them not to tell anybody, and Buff didn't. And like he said, he went to his own doctor, so WWE had to pay for it, and he took no time off from the road. So he went to his own doctor to get it fixed. He didn't ask WWE to pay for any stitches. He didn't get anybody in any trouble. But at one point, Buff said, and this is what he told me, he was walking through the hallway, and Shane was walking over, and he had the Hardy Boys with him. So Buff waves over to Shane Helms, and Shane just walks by like he doesn't see him. And Buff got pissed. So that's when he went to John Laurinaitis. John Laurinaitis was working for WCW, but then came over to WWE when they all did. And he went to Laurinaitis and told him exactly what happened. That Shane was the reason that he got the blood. He claimed he fell. And they were at wrestling school, like wrestling training, which Buff in the back of his mind is like, I'm Buff Bagwell. I don't need to go to wrestling school. But he went because, again, Buff was trying to show in WWE that he was a team player. He didn't want heat. He didn't want to come in with an ego, even though he had one in WCW. He wanted to show that he was a team player because he wanted to stay in WWE. So that's why all this craziness went down. Now, he wrestles Booker T in the main event of Monday Night Raw, and people complain that it's a bad match. Buff admits it wasn't a barn burner, but there were no mistakes made.
Definitely see that.
The next week, Buff is fired from WWE. Buff said even if the match was bad, like let's pretend for a second this was a bad match. Zack is right, everybody's right, the match is bad. That's not a logical reason to fire somebody who is a 5-time World Tag Team Champion, Rookie of the Year, Tag Team of the Year, 31 years old, and has 20 years in the business with incredible matches. Buff believes they were just trying to get rid of him. His friends believe it was the slap to Shane that got him fired. And in fact, here's another funny story. Buff and I are taking another trip to Huntsville, Alabama. Yeah, Huntsville, Alabama is where all of our craziness happens.
What happened now?
Well, the first time was the Darkside of the Ring thing. Another time was we were caught in this torrential rainfall. We had to pull the car over. The power was out in the building when we got there. But here's another thing. Buff and I, at one point, we just started talking out of nowhere about him getting fired from WWE. And we tried to pinpoint a logical reason for why they would want to fire Buff Bagwell. And we were in the car for a couple hours. I swear to you, we couldn't come up with any logical reason for why you'd want to fire Buff Bagwell.
I can't think any reason why.
Because again, we went down the list. Number one, the fact that him and Booker T had a bad match. Again, I'd have to watch the match again to know for sure. But again, why would you fire somebody over one bad match? Doesn't make sense. Number two, they said that he faked an injury to take time off the road. Buff claims that never happened, and I believe him. Then there's the whole incident with Jim Ross, this motherfucker right here, where he said in a round table, they were talking about WCW, that Buff's mother called Jim Ross because Buff needed time off the road. But his mom called on his behalf. And Jim Ross called the mother and said, look, you're a wonderful lady, but if Buff needs time off, he can come talk to me. I don't want to talk to you about it. Now, Buff claims that's a fucking lie, and that Jim Ross, with that statement, pretty much blackballed Buff.
Do you believe that?
I don't know if it blackballed him, but I do know that people tend to believe stuff that JR says, because JR's word is gospel in wrestling. And there was a period of time where I wasn't sure if it was true until I interviewed Buff, and I asked him about it. And he gave me his side of the story, and it wouldn't make sense. He said, I would never have my mother call the building. But again, he does another hypothetical. Let's say his mother did call. That's not a reason to fire him either.
No, it's not. That's
just give him a slap on the wrist, say, hey, Bagwell, don't have your fucking mother call here anymore. And that's all you had to do. So we knew it couldn't be that. And then it's also, well, he was on Somas. Here's the thing. We already mentioned earlier, Buff timed his highs. Every time he showed up to the building in WCW, he was sober until the show was over. So here's my thing. If Buff Bagwell was willing to show up to work sober in WCW, where he had a lot of backstage power and stroke, why would he want to show up high or drunk to WWE where he has no power and stroke? Does that make sense to anyone?
Nope.
No. So again, that can't be the reason. So maybe the slap from Shane Helms? That could have been it. But again, there's been backstage fights in WWE before, and none of those people got fired.
None of them did.
And also, they talk about this match being bad. Zach.
Yes?
Do you remember where this match with Booker T took place?
On Monday Night Raw.
Yes, but do you remember what town they were in?
No.
Tacoma, Washington. I saw them in Tacoma, Washington maybe once or twice, maybe for a pay-per-view. But Tacoma, Washington was not WCW territory. And here's the thing people need to understand about the Monday Night Wars. It's not like today, where AEW and NXT go every fucking where and touch the same buildings. They rarely do. Rarely, okay? It very seldom interacted, WWE and WCW. They were in different buildings, different fan bases. People who watched WWE didn't look at WCW. People who looked at WCW rarely looked at WWE.
Different color rings, different color everything.
Different styles of fans. WCW had the Southern territory, as we mentioned before, was the Southern wrestling.
Southern wrestling.
It's different from WWE style. It's not like today, where WWE fans and AEW fans, it's everybody love everybody, except for the tribal people on Twitter. But I'm saying, it's a different scenario. But here's the funny part.
What's that?
They said Buff was fired a week later. Guess where Monday Night Raw was the following week?
Where?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Georgia.
Atlanta, Georgia. WCW territory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Zach,
Yes.
you've never been a booker.
No.
You have no booking experience.
No.
But I'm sure even you would think, well, I got Buff Bagwell, I've got Booker T, I want to do a WCW invasion, and I have a show coming up in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I ought to put them there
Yeah.
in Ted Turner's backyard
Yes.
so the fans will register with this shit?
Yes.
As opposed to Tacoma, Washington, where no one gave a fuck about Buff Bagwell or Booker T. You set them up for fucking failure. And then you fire Buff Bagwell in Atlanta, where he was guaranteed to get a pop. Not just because WCW was in Atlanta. Buff lived in Atlanta.
He's from Atlanta.
He's a Georgia boy. Hometown boy.
He's a hometown boy.
He would have got a massive fucking pop.
Oh, hell yeah, he would.
And they fucked him even worse.
How's that?
The night of the Monday Night Raw show,
Yes.
just as Buff Bagwell is about to walk out to the ring, they're playing his music. Shane McMahon stops him and says, hey, there's one more thing we need to tell you that we forgot. He goes, what? He goes, when you walk out to the ring, you can't look into the camera. Now, for those of you who've never seen a Buff Bagwell match,
He always fucks with the camera.
that's his gimmick.
That's his gimmick.
When he comes down to the ring, he looks into the camera. He does certain spots, then he taunts into the camera. That's literally his gimmick. That's like telling DX, don't do a crotch chop. Like, the fuck?
Fuck you.
That was fucking... That's all he does. He struts to the ring. He talks into the camera. I'm Buff. I'm the stuff. The girls can't get enough. Do not adjust your screens. I really am this good looking. Like, that's his thing. And then he like do a hip toss, throw somebody out of the ring. And he's like, I got him again. He's like, I'm whooping that ass. He do the laugh. That was Buff's whole shtick. So that's why when you see him walk to the ring, he's avoiding the camera. And I knew something was weird because I saw that match in 2001. Because again, I was a Buff Bagwell fan. I was happy for this fucking match. I'm telling my friends, oh, you got to see this shit. I had friends who never watched WCW. And I'm like, check this out. And I see Buff walking to the ring. And I knew something was wrong. Again, I didn't have my analyst brain yet. I was still just a fan. I wasn't in the business. I wasn't studying the business. But even I knew as a fan, something wasn't right. And now when Buff tells me all this, that's the reason why. There was no reason to fire Buff Bagwell. Buff had a lot to contribute to this company. He was amazing. He deserved better.
He deserved way better.
Fired from the WWE in 2001, Marcus spends the next 11 years wrestling in independent promotions. Battling his addictions, Marcus makes multiple attempts to get clean. Back in 2012, while driving home from rehab, he passes out at the wheel. He wakes up and realizes he's driving, so he cranks the Jeep and rolls it 4 times. It was the result of a withdrawal seizure, and it caused his teeth to get knocked out and his neck to swell up. He had to be put in a medically induced coma, and if it wasn't for the plate in his neck from the last injury, he would have been dead.
So lucky motherfucker right
so
there.
Neck injury number 1 saved him in neck injury number 2.
What a coincidence that turned out to be.
Yeah.
Isn't that ironic, Vinny?
It is.
It's ironic as hell, man.
Like
Shit.
that, in a way, that first neck injury is kind of a blessing because they said without that, he would have died. He would have been dead from that injury. And that has to suck. Like imagine you go to rehab, you get out of rehab, you're clean, you're driving home, and you get a seizure from withdrawals. So basically, Buff got a seizure for not being high or drunk. He was off the pills and the booze for so long, it caused him to have a seizure and crash. So basically, if he had relapsed in the car, he probably wouldn't have crashed. Or he would have crashed a different way if he got too high. That's fucked up, man.
That is fucked up.
That is sick. But yeah, he did wrestle on the Independents, which is where I met Buff, as I mentioned earlier. So he was wrestling the Indies. He was one of the first big stars that had to go back to the Indies.
Yep, yeah.
And started working on the Indies and, perfecting the art of selling 8x10s and pictures and going through those ordeals. And not only that, here's the other thing about him wrestling on the Indies.
What's that?
Because he no longer had the TV restrictions and the big contract, that's why when he relapsed, he was going off the rails. Because having that WCW leash on him allowed him to not go as crazy. There were moments where he had to control it, have it more regimented. But now he's just like, fuck it. I can do whatever I want now. With the injury, he wasn't able to wrestle and struggled to pay the bills. So he gets casted on a show called Gigolos. And gets paid $25,000 to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He was told that he would be on the show as a mentor to the other gigolos on the show. So now, this is the controversial profession that we talked about earlier. Buff now becomes a gigolo, a male escort, if you will.
I don't know what to say about this. When I saw that, I was like, huh?
When I first found out about it, I was on the regular guys. So here's a funny story about this. When I was on the regular guys, and again, this is around the time they knew I was a wrestling fan, so anything wrestling related they brought to my attention. Also, the regular guys were good friends with Buff Bagwell. So Buff knew the regular guys for years. He would always sometimes call them, when he's like on the road and stuff, and Buff would have regular segments or interviews with them, so they knew who he was. So of course, when they find out he's a male escort, they ask me, Vinny, would you pay money to hang out with Buff for an hour? And I said, no. And they said, why? And I said, I'm not going to hire a male escort. I'm not gay. And they go, Booch, it's not a gay thing. I'm just saying, if you could hang out with him for an hour in a bar and he tells you wrestling stories, do you want to do that? I'm like, well, fuck yeah. They set up a GoFundMe page because it was like $800 for like an hour with Buff at the time. So they tried to set up a GoFundMe page to raise $800, and we were going to give that $800 to Buff Bagwell and have me hang out with him for an hour. I did eventually tell him that story, and he laughed his ass off. But yeah, that was a true story. They wanted me to pay to hang out with Buff for an hour and just have him tell me good old wrestling stories. Obviously no sets because neither one of us is gay. Although in the interview they tried to ask him if there was something gay related to this. He's like, no, bro, there's nothing gay about this. And of course the regular guys, they were being smart asses.
Well, yeah.
They were being their shock jock selves, and Buff was getting nervous because Buff didn't want people to think that because he was a male escort that he was gay for pay or anything like that.
If you and I were on the regular guys, we heard about Buff, we would fuck with him, wouldn't we?
No.
I would.
I wouldn't. I didn't know him that well. See, today I could probably do that, but that's because we're friends now. I might get away with a little ball busting. Maybe. Desperate for money, Marcus Bagwell agrees to appear on the reality TV show Gigolos. But once on set, it becomes clear that the show expects more from Marcus than he anticipated. They expected him to have sex with the girl that the Gigolos go to visit. Marcus is nervous because he wasn't told in advance and had zero blood in his penis. In other words, he didn't have an erection. No hard on.
Nope.
He was not hard.
He went limp.
He was limp, yeah.
And it happens.
It does.
It happens.
Happens to every guy.
Yep.
Some guys won't go on camera with it, but Buff didn't really have a choice in the matter. So he gets real close to her and makes it look like he's having sex with her, if you see the clip in Darkside of the Ring. Afterwards, he apologizes to the guy who was paying him, saying, I'm sorry, I couldn't have sex with her. And the guy said, you're not supposed to. And he says, what? Because apparently on Gigolos was kind of like softcore porn. Now, I knew this story a long time ago, because obviously Buff told it to me. And that was when I learned the difference between softcore porn and hardcore porn.
What's the difference?
In softcore porn, they're not actually fucking. In hardcore porn, they are.
Yeah, they go full Monty.
That's why you notice if you ever watch like a softcore porn, like an HBO or Cinemax,
yeah,
you never see the guy's dick.
Nope.
Even when the girl's giving a blowjob, they never show the man's dick. Yeah. And even though you see like the front of the pussy, you never actually see the pussy itself.
Yeah.
They keep the junk covered in that regard. Like, you'll see the girl's tits, that's about it. So Buff found out he wasn't supposed to, but then when he revealed in an interview about this story, the Gigolos people got pissed and called Buff. Like, bro, you're not supposed to, like, apparently it's some kind of kayfabe thing. So basically Buff, in the world of Gigolos, exposed the business. Yeah, because it can fuck up the whole show. Because you have to think they're really fucking this girl. Otherwise, why the fuck you gonna watch? He later shows up on the website Cowboys for Angels, which is a male escort site. That's the site that the regular guys found Buff on, where you can book a gigolo for a date for a weekend for a week. It was anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000, which is weird because I remember seeing the $800 for an hour and shit like that. Judy was uncomfortable with it, but knew they needed to pay the bills. This is, of course, Judy the wife, not his mother, Judy.
Yeah, true.
So his wife hates this, obviously. She doesn't want her husband going on these escort dates and all that shit. But here's the problem. They need the money. And Buff's got this injured neck. He can't do anything else. I mean, yeah, he wasn't really wrestling on the indies because of his neck injury, so they have to make a living. And he's trying to provide for the family. And again, he said, what would you do if you realize you're going to lose your house and you're going to end up homeless? What would you do?
What would you do?
It's like that old hip-hop song from like the 2000s,
What
would you do if your son was at home crying all alone on the bedroom floor because he's hungry and the only way to feed him is to sleep with a man for a little bit of money and his daddy's gone, so we're smoking rock now, in and out of lockdown, I ain't got a job now, so for you this is just a good time, but for me this is what I call life. That's an actual hip-hop song.
Huh.
And they asked the question, what would you do if your back was against the wall and you needed money desperately to support your family or keep a roof over your head? What would you do if you were presented with this opportunity to make thousands of dollars? Some people might not do it because you're comfortable being homeless. It was the only thing they could do. I mean, yeah, his wife had a job, but it wasn't enough to pay all the bills.
That's true.
So Judy was having to turn a blind eye to this, which was tough. The first client Buff gets, they fall in love instantly. Buff would live there for a week, paying the bills, and then go home for a week. He ended up seeing the girl behind Judy's back.
Uh-oh.
Eventually, Buff calls Judy and tells her he's leaving her for the girl.
Oh.
Buff regrets it to this day and says if he could do it over again, he would have stayed with Judy. This is another scenario where, again, we're not trying to bash Buff. We're just basing it off of what we saw on Darkside. And obviously, I was familiar with this going on because here's the thing. The client that Buff has, I've met this woman.
Have you?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I'm not going to say her full name,
Mm-hmm.
but her first name is Sherry.
Okay.
And I didn't know this is how they met until later on.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Remember when I told you that Buff had a manager / girlfriend at the time that we were working together on the podcast?
Yeah.
That was Sherry.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, there was an on again, off again thing going on. And when I hear about this, it really makes me think like, and Judy's still delivering the mail and shaving his back? How the fuck did Buff pull that off? Like,
How did Buff not get manhandled or caught? You're like, you just cheated on your wife and you're trusting her with a razor? You're a braver man than me.
Like, here's the thing, though. It was one thing when it was a whole client situation. But now Buff started falling in love with Sherry. That's why they asked her, is he still with that woman today? And Judy says no. I'm about to tell you why they're not. But at the end of this Darkside series, you see Buff with a woman. That's his latest girlfriend. That's not the girl. That's a woman named Stacy that Buff met. And for those of you that do DDP yoga, that girl Stacy is the girl that's in the Energy DDP yoga DVD. When Diamond Dallas Page is doing the workout, he says, over here in our modification position, we got the lovely Stacy. In our extreme position is Arthur. Stacy in the modification position and energy workout, that's Buff's girlfriend today. That's who Buff is dating. But Sherry, he dated for about 7 years. And she also, at one point, invested money in UCW as well. I remember driving Voldemort to the, I believe it was the Perimeter Mall, or Lenox Mall, if I'm not mistaken. It was Lenox Mall, I think, to go have a sit-down meeting with her. I wasn't at the meeting, because I was not allowed to be present at this meeting, for whatever reason. I didn't care. But that's when I first met Sherry. Then I found out later, she managed Buff and a few other people. And she and Buff were dating as well. And I had met Sherry. I had spoken with Sherry. She seemed pretty cool. We would sometimes smoke cigarettes in the backyard because we smoke cigarettes. Buff doesn't. And when we would do the Buff and Boochcast, we had a segment called Bitch Behind the Curtain, and Sherry would be the bitch behind the curtain. And she would come on and basically plug everything that Buff was doing. Like, go see Buff this weekend at these shows. And that was her job. And then apparently things got really hectic between them. Like, Sherry was a psycho, and at one point she was like getting into tiffs with Jonna and everybody else. I think one time Buff got into argument with Sherry because Jonna, who's Buff's niece, her kids were around Sherry, and then at one point they went up to her mom and said, Mommy, do you remember when we read about the Bible about devils and demons? Because John is very religious, and her kids also read the Bible and stuff. So they thought that Sherry was a wicked demon. And Buff's like telling them that. And she got mad, like, I can't believe you, Mark. How dare you say that these children think I'm wicked? How can you say that? And we're both like, because they told us? Like, so we're not making this shit up. Like, these kids literally said they thought that Sherry was a wicked demon. We're not saying she's a wicked demon. They said she was a wicked demon. And I remember the day, like, she came over to visit for a couple days. They had this massive fight. And I'm there to go take Buff to the airport. And I'm getting phone calls from Jonna. I'm getting phone calls from DDP warning me that she's gone fucking psycho off the deep end. They're fighting in the house. And Sherry's yelling at him and Buff's yelling back. And it's like, I'm just standing there wondering what the fuck's going on. Buff just makes me stay in the bedroom and stay out of this. I feel like a kid being moved out of the room while mommy and daddy are fighting. It's that kind of vibe because they're arguing over crazy shit. I'm just here like, look, I'm just here to take Buff to the airport. I don't give a fuck what you two are doing. Whatever's going on between the two of you is between the two of you. I just want to get this man to the airport so we can both make our money. That's all I'm thinking. So yeah, so Sherry was kind of a handful. When I first met Sherry, she was nice. It wasn't until later on that I found out she was a little psycho, and also she was a little drugged up and alcohol-like herself. It was a very toxic relationship that eventually came to an end. And one of the things when Buff got clean was they severed all ties. I later had to block her because she kept calling me while Buff was in rehab, and I just didn't want to deal with it. I personally had no hatred towards Sherry, but I have loyalty to Buff.
That's understandable right there.
So I had to like cut some people out because I just had no desire to get involved in the drama.
I hear you on
And
that.
the DDP yoga people didn't want me to get involved in the drama.
That's smart right there.
So I just stayed out of it. So that was my situation there. Dealing with relationship and financial problems, Marcus's drug use spirals out of control, resulting in multiple DUIs and eventually another car wreck. This was in August of 2020.
I remember that. I remember I was at work waiting to clock in. All of a sudden, Buff Bagwell arrested for DUI. And the first person I called was you. Remember me calling you? I was like, what the hell? Buff was in jail? I was like, yeah. I was like, what the hell did he do this time? DUI.
Well, here's the thing. He didn't go to jail for another couple years because the trial kept getting postponed. And then finally it did, and he went to jail. But by that time, he was already sober. So we had to put the word out to people that this is from a few years ago. This is like in 2023 was when he finally had to go to jail for this. And he's like, we're saying this is from 3 years ago. I'm just now serving my time. And that's why he's on probation now, which that is the funniest shit in the world. Because here's why. Obviously, he has to go get drug tested regularly.
Yeah,
go to DUI classes and things like that.
He had to do all those classes. I had to do that myself.
So what happens is he had to go get a limited permit. And here's why this is funny to me. Because when you have a limited permit, it tells you when you're allowed to drive and when you're not allowed to drive and where you can go and where you can't go because it's limited. They give you a list of eligible places you can drive to. The first one on the list was funny as fuck.
What is it?
Number 1, you can only drive to and from your place of employment. For those of you playing the home game, Buff is a professional wrestler. You know what that means?
He doesn't really have a place of employment.
No, he does, but you know where that place of employment is?
Where?
Anywhere! On the fucking planet! That's
Anywhere.
what pro wrestlers do. They travel the fucking country. He could go to a show in Georgia. He could have a show in Florida. He could have a show in Tennessee. He could be in New York. He had a show in Alaska, Hawaii, the fucking UK. You're a wrestler. You travel anywhere. So we had to figure out this shit. So what they did was every time he goes out of town, out of state, he has to file papers with the court. And this is where he got another arrest, was when he wrote out the paperwork they were talking about the return flights and private flights and everything else. Well, he had a layover in Dallas. There was no room on the paper to put a layover in Dallas. So at the moment he thought, well, I don't think I have to mention I was in a layover in Dallas. He did. And he went to jail for not mentioning that. It was like for a day or two. But of course, the article that gets put out says, Buff has another DUI, which is a fucking lie. And then the second time he had an issue was he was in a DUI class, and there was a teacher who, from what Buff has told me, is a massive fucking cunt.
Capital C.
Capital C-U-N-T.
Ooh.
So he's in this DUI class, and they have a thing where you read from these two boxes, or you do your testimony and everything else. So this one guy didn't read from the boxes and got in trouble. So when Buff goes up, he asked the teacher, point blank, do you need me to read from these boxes, or do you want me to do my testimony? And she looked him dead in the eye and said, just do your testimony. So Buff starts reading his testimony. She stops and she goes, excuse me, you didn't read from the two boxes, and failed him for the class. And Buff said, I just asked you if I'm supposed to read from these boxes. If you wanted me to read from them, why didn't you say that? So now Buff is mad. Now he doesn't cuss her, but he is mad as fuck right now. And he's losing his shit. So she throws him out of class. So he got in trouble again for class disruption. And again, they put out, Buff gets another DUI. Fucking lied. Again, he had no DUI, no drug arrests. He has been clean and sober since August of 2022. So he had a issue with paperwork and a class disruption. Those were the things he went to jail for. Those were the issues. So he has not been on the drugs or alcohol. He's been completely clean. Whoever's putting this article out is definitely defaming his character because they want to get catchy headlines. So no, Buff has not relapsed. He has been clean and sober August of 2022 when he got sent to Black Bear. But in August 2020 was when he had the car wreck. He crashed into the back of a building behind Cumberland Mall. He was completely blacked out with pills and alcohol and went through a MARTA station bathroom. This is in August of 2020. This is almost 4 years ago. And this is the car wreck that fucked up his knee and other parts of his body, and they go to the hospital, and he was on the crutches and the knee brace for so long.
Yeah, I remember the crutches all the time and the
That
knee
was
brace.
well, it was from this.
Okay, that was from that car wreck.
Yes. Already at rock bottom with addiction, Marcus receives life-shattering news about his mother, Judy. Marcus Bagwell and his family now face their biggest challenge yet, as his mother, Judy, is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She also caught COVID, and on November 5th, 2021, she passes away.
I remember that day very well. Yep.
I do too. In fact, I'm going to let you guys in on another secret. Here's another story you're not going to get anywhere else. Do you know how I remember, without even having to look it up, that November 5th, 2021 is Judy's death date?
Yes.
It's for two reasons.
How?
One, it's my grandmother's birth date who passed away.
Oh, okay.
And number two, because on November 4th of 2021, Buff and I went to visit Judy the night before she died.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that as
Outside of
well.
the nursing staff, we were the last two people to see her alive.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I'll tell you this is what happened.
Too.
Buff and I were working at the house like we always do. We were getting stuff organized. Like we had a few orders we had to ship out, or I had to ship out the next day. So we're getting everything in the envelope, writing down the addresses, fulfilling all the orders, getting the DVDs, the 8x10s, Buff's personalizing them. I'm organizing them. And I got them all ready to take to the UPS store the next day. As I'm leaving his house, I get halfway down the hallway and Buff says, "Hey, brother, can you hold on a second?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He goes, "I need you to do me a really big favor." I'm like, "Sure, buddy, what's up?" He goes, "I need you to take me to see my mother." He goes, "I know it's late at night, but I got this weird feeling she's not going to make it through the night. And I really want to go say goodbye." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem, man. Let's get in the car." Because at the time, I mentioned before, he had the Saab. The transmission in the car blew. So Buff no longer had a car to drive around. So either I drove him around or he Ubered if I wasn't with him. So we get in the car. We drive to the nursing home where she's staying. He goes inside. I go park the car because, again, he's on crutches and a knee brace, so we don't want him walking through the parking lot. So it's easier just park at the front and then go park the car, and then I take the long walk because obviously I need exercise. So we walk into the building. Now, Buff says he wants to go see Judy Bagwell and everything. And one of the nurses is like, "It's late at night. We're not having visitors. We're not going to have anybody back here." And Buff goes, "Oh, I'm going to see my mother. You're not going to fucking tell me I'm not going back there." So now Buff is losing shit, which is understandable. He wants to see his mother, who's dying. So I'm trying to calm Buff down. He's not listening to me. Now, up until this point, I've only called him Buff. I never called him his real name. This is the first time I ever called him Marcus. Because finally I went, "Marcus!" And he stopped. I said, "I got this. Just let me handle it. I know you're upset. You have every right to be. Just let me handle it." So I go talk to the lady. I sweet talk the nurse. I tell her, "Look, I'm sorry for my friend. He's a little emotional. His mom is sick. We just really want to see her. He's got this weird feeling she's not going to make it through the night. Really wants to say goodbye." And she's like, "We can't have anybody. Look, I understand you got rules and regulations, but please, bend him this one time. He wouldn't be able to live with himself if he couldn't say goodbye to his mother." I said, "Well, she's in the COVID ward, so you're going to need to wear all this protective stuff." I said, "Man, whatever you need us to wear, bring it over here. We'll put it on. Just let us through, please."
What you have to wear?
We had to put on latex gloves, obviously a mask.
Yeah.
Protective, like body stuff on our shoes, latex gloves. We looked like we were about to perform like an operation.
Okay, you look like you're
They
surgeons.
look like surgeons. So we're walking in here. We go in. We're seeing all these old people. All of them are old and feeble and COVID positive. And then we walk into the room and we see Judy, and she is in pain, bro. Like she is wincing. She's hurt. She's got a little bit of like fuzz on her face. Like she's got like a little bit of like a hair coming out. And he Buff's like, "Did anybody shave her?" So he goes and gets razor and shaving cream and shaves his mom. And he's talking to her. He goes, "See, you're looking beautiful now, Mom." And he's trying to like talk to her, but she's in so much pain. She's barely paying attention. And then finally at one point, this is when the nurses were kind of not looking at everything. It was just me, Buff, and Judy in this room. And Judy's laying right here, like where my phone is. I'm right here. Buff is right here. Now, Buff's real close. I'm a couple steps back because I'm kind of letting Buff have his moment. I was just there to give him a ride, but I'm there. And every now and then he would say like, "This is Vinny. He's a friend of mine." I would say, "Hey, Judy." Like I would say a couple words, but I was letting Buff have his moment. And at one point, Buff pulls the mask down and shows his face. And all of a sudden, Judy opens her eyes. She smiles and she goes, "Hi, Marcus." And it's a really emotional moment. Like I'm damn near crying. I'm about to start crying just thinking about it. So I'm sitting there watching all this, and he's just thanking his mom, telling her how much he loves her, and, thanking her for everything he's done over the years. And finally, after about 20, 25 minutes, maybe 30, he finally says goodbye. The nurses tell us we have to go, and Buff says his final goodbyes. We take everything off, walk to the car, we go out to dinner. We hung out at Longhorn, kind of decompressing from the whole experience. I take him home. I get up the next day, go to work. He said, hey, give me a call, because I always call Buff after work to find out what it is we're doing today. And I'm calling him, and he's not answering. It took me about 5 tries to finally get him on the phone. He finally calls me, because apparently Buff had been getting calls all day, because that's when he told me Judy had passed. Like, after we left, it was like the next day, Judy had passed. And a lot of people were freaking out, and a lot of people were worried about him. And I was a little bit worried about him, but not as much. And the reason I wasn't worried was because I knew Buff got his closure. If he hadn't been able to say goodbye to Judy, I would have drove to the house. I probably would have put him on suicide watch if he couldn't say goodbye to his mom. But because he had that moment, I knew he was going to be okay. Now keep in mind, this is 2021. Buff hadn't gone to rehab yet or anything like that. So at a certain point, he was, obviously he was drinking a lot. And people were saying, well, I'm worried because he's drinking a lot. I'm like, his mother just died. Obviously he's going to drink. I know people who aren't alcoholics that booze up if they had a relative pass away, especially their mother. So I'm like, give it a fucking break. And he's like, well, what if he gets in an accident? He has no car. His transmission's blown. Eventually, Marcus's niece, Jonna, comes into the picture and gives Mark a place to stay. He moves into Jonna's old house that was empty after her mother died from COVID. She tells him that in order to stay in the house, he had to get clean. They reach out to DDP, and he helps Buff get back on his feet. And that was the moment, because he had moved out of the house with Voldemort. We got all his stuff out of there. That was an uncomfortable move-out experience.
I didn't help with that one, did I?
No, you weren't there for that.
Okay.
You weren't there for the move out. I think I tried to reach out to you, but you weren't available. You were working or whatever.
I was working.
So I had to take care of that. And then we were taking everything to his parents' house. He stayed there. Then, after he was moving out of the parents' house, he moves into Jonna's house. So I had to help Buff move again. Then eventually he moves out of that, and he's in the accountability crib. So I had to move everything out of there and get him into the accountability crib. That was after Change or Die was done being filmed. So yeah, when I say I helped Buff move a lot.
You helped him move a lot.
Yes.
More times you can count or wanted to.
Well, more times than I can count. But I wanted to do it because he was my friend. He was paying me. I got paid every time. I wasn't doing this for my health.
No, you weren't.
I was getting paid for that. So we took care of everything there. So Buff ends up moving to Jonna's house because while he was staying at his parents' place, Jonna reached out to him. Because again, Jonna remembers when she was a little girl that Buff was the guy that took care of the family. And Jonna's father wasn't really in the picture. So Buff took care of her like it was her daughter. Even though she calls her Uncle Mark, she might as well have been his daughter. So Jonna saw she was in a position now, because she married a rich guy, where she can return the favor and help him out. And Jonna never forgets. So she said she wanted to help him, but he had to get clean.
Yeah, that's a deal.
And that's why during the intervention, they said, Jonna's done with you if you don't get clean, because clearly you have a problem. And then that's when DDP comes into the picture, and he ends up being on Change or Die, and obviously Change or Die is going to air at some point, and that's going to be a hell of a show. It's going to show the story of Buff getting clean and sober. Buff later reached out to Scotty Riggs and has him move into the accountability crib and helps him get back on his feet. And that's another big thing, because he found out he's like living in his car. So he said, hey man, why don't you come on up here? And he pays to get tires put on his car because he needed new tires and gas up his car. He said, get on up here. And Scotty did. So now him and Scotty Riggs lived in the accountability crib. I think Scotty moved out though, because he got back on his feet. And for a while, Scotty was staying there. And I got to meet Scotty Riggs in person.
How was he like?
He's cool.
Okay.
Huge Dallas Cowboys fan.
Well, I think he's from Texas, isn't he?
I guess so. I know he's a big Dallas Cowboys fan because he has Cowboy stuff and he has Cowboy tattoos. I figure if you're good enough to get the Cowboy star or the Cowboy logo tattooed on your arm, you must be a big fan. So, I had great interactions with Scotty Riggs. He's a really good dude. Now, his ex-wives still love and respect him despite the divorces, which is another big selling point of this series. The fact that his ex-wives are still rooting for him and have nothing but nice things to say about him despite the divorces.
And usually you don't hear that with you hear it with ex-wives and ex-husbands.
Especially with the way they were treated. They have every right to hate him, and they don't.
And they don't.
So obviously Buff is reconciled with them on some level to where they can interact on a human level. They say, despite his flaws, he's a genuine loving person. That's the thing. Mark made a lot of mistakes, but he's a genuine good person. Like, you've never heard stories of him fucking over anyone in the business.
Or sleeping with one of his friend's girls or something like that.
Basically, anything negative that happened to Buff in the business, he did to himself.
That's true.
Never to anyone else. That's the difference. Buff is a genuine good person. Marcus is a genuine good person. That's why I say that. Buff now is focusing on his sobriety and recovery and wants to get back in the ring. That's another thing. Because that was the thing when Buff and I first started working together. His goal was he wanted to get back on television. He wants to have one more run on TV to show that he is Buff and he is still the stuff. He wants to prove it. And here's the thing. He can still work. He can still go. Time hasn't fucked that up. I've seen him work matches on the indies. He can fucking go. And he was able to go while he was on the shit. Now that he's sober and he's getting back into the best shape of his life, both him and Scotty Riggs, they're ready. Whether they go to WWE or if they go to AEW, they're ready to take over. And I'll even make a bold statement right now.
Uh-oh.
If Buff goes to AEW, I will reinstate AEW back on the Boochcast just to show my support for Buff Bagwell. Don't you shoot me that look. We're doing it for Buff. You know we are.
They're gonna fuck them over like they did CM Punk and Cody, just to let
And if
you
they-
know.
and if they
they're
do-
going to, you know as well as I do.
And if they do, we'll trash them again.
All right, you're on your own.
But I'm saying, if Buff Bagwell ever gets signed to AEW, I will reinstate AEW back on the Boochcast and do regular recaps if they bring back Buff Bagwell. He wants one more run on primetime TV to show that he is still Buff Bagwell and still able to go and can still put on great matches. He wants to do it one last time before he hangs it up for good. That's his end goal. And he also hopes to one day maybe be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I'd like to see him go.
I would too.
Like I said, he's had a legendary career, and as I mentioned before, he is the greatest tag team wrestler of all time. Like I said, comment below if you disagree, and I'll be able to tell from the comments if you actually pay attention to what I'm saying, or if you just hear one sentence and get triggered. But really, that's all they had to say here about Buff Bagwell, and I feel like I've told quite a few stories here, but there is one thing I will address.
Are you going where I think you're going?
Yes,
Oh, shit.
but I'm going to go there because I do need to say this. I'm taking the hat off because I want to be real with this one. As you guys know, I mentioned a while back here about somebody that we hung out with at WrestleCade or whatever, or I was going to have something to say about a certain individual. And I told some people I was going to address this, but I couldn't find anything in the actual episode to where I could tell this story, so I decided to save it for the end. 2 weeks ago, here on Darkside of the Ring, when we talked about Marty Jannetty, I put up a picture of a certain individual. There's a picture that popped up
Oh, yeah.
about a certain individual who liked to touch kids.
Oh, shit.
His name was Javon Michael Miller. In fact, in post, I'm going to put the picture up again. Here it is. That's the picture. This gentleman right here is a guy who fucked over me and Buff Bagwell on a massive fucking level. Now, granted, Voldemort did damage to both of us as well. But this gentleman here, Michael Long, really fucked us over. Because, as I mentioned before, Buff and I did a podcast together called the Buff and Boochcast.
I remember that.
Michael Long did a podcast with Buff Bagwell called Rebuilding Buff.
I remember that.
And for some reason, people get the two of us confused, me and Michael Long.
Why?
And I watched my name get dragged through the mud because of this kitty-touching faggot. And yeah, I'm using that word.
Go ahead. Use all the words you want.
Because I'm that fucking angry.
I know you are. I remember
All
this
right?
very well. I remember
This motherfucker
I remember this.
lied, cheated, and scammed Buff Bagwell fans. And there are some fans who are aware that it's his fucking fault. But there were other people my fault. And the reason I say that is because about a year ago, somebody that I work with, I'll just say the name, Derek Shapiro. You guys know Derek is an affiliate of the Boochcast. He's been appearances on my show. I did some Darkside of the 2000 videos with him. He has a guy on his show named Dylan Schneider. Met him, he's a cool guy. He found a Reddit page that had a video that I did years ago for HVMA when I worked there. Me and a gentleman named Antonio did a video together because Antonio used to work there. And Antonio was interviewing me about being a great social media manager, which I am. And they said, here's the guy that ran Buff's social media. And I'm talking about being a great social media. And said, well, obviously he didn't follow his own advice. I could clearly tell that wasn't Buff Bagwell's Twitter with all the stuff he was posting. Let me make this perfectly clear right now. Yes, I am a social media manager. Yes, I am an expert on social media managing. I didn't manage that Twitter page. Javon did. Michael Long did. And the reason he got that Twitter page was because he politicked behind my back, and I found this out when I talked to Buff's niece, Jonna. She told me this. That he politicked behind my back to convince Buff to let him run the Twitter page since I wasn't really doing anything with it. Now, the reason I wasn't doing anything with it was because I was too busy helping Buff with everything else in his life. Taking him to shows, driving him to the airport, helping him with the day-to-day stuff that he did around the house. I wasn't just managing his career, I was helping him manage his whole fucking life during this time. And at one point, while we were doing all this, Buff and I even talked about maybe doing a podcast together again. But we hadn't gotten around to it because we had so much other shit that we were taking care of. So Michael Long decides to come into the picture and offers Buff a chance to do a podcast with him. And he says, I'll fund everything, but I think it'd be great to have you do a podcast and tell some of your stories. And Buff agreed. And he told me, don't worry, Vinny, you're not going anywhere. He's going to do my podcast. He's going to help me with some bookings and stuff, but you still have a job. You're still going to work with me. We're still going to do our thing. He's just joining the team. And I said, okay. And at a certain point, Michael and I started talking. And there are some similarities between us. We're both heavy-set people. We're both bald till he grew his hair back out, or I think he has a wig. I can't fucking tell anymore. Also, we both do stand-up comedy. We've both worked in radio. We've both done podcasting, and we've both done podcasting with Buff. So there are some similarities between us, but we're not the same person. Alan Funk found that out the hard way. He thought I was Michael Long. We got into a shouting match, and he later had to come over and apologize to me. And I accepted his apology. We shook hands, and we buried the hatchet. So we're good. But Michael Long was the one who ran that Twitter page. He was the one who fucked you guys over. And by guys, I mean all the fans that bought shit off of that Twitter page. And again, you can even see some of the receipts, because people were posting receipts. All the receipts said either Michael Long or Javon Miller. And I saw the Javon Miller on his Venmo, and I even asked him once, who's Javon Miller? He said, oh, that's my agent who handles my comedy bookings. Not knowing that was his government shoot Christian name. Although I shouldn't call it Christian name. There's nothing Christian about this worthless fat fuck. So again, at the time he said, that's my agent. All right, can't really argue with that. But you notice none of them say Marcus Bagwell. None of them say Vinny Bucci. We didn't take any money from any fucking fans. I have never stolen money from anyone. I don't con people out of their fucking money. And that's why I'm so angry right now. Because let me tell you who Vinny Bucci is if you haven't fucking figured me out. I'm a hard-working son of a bitch. I work for everything I have. I have earned every accomplishment that I have ever fucking achieved. I'm the type of person, if I need money, I don't do a GoFundMe page. I don't set people up. I don't con people out of their money. You know what I do? I get a fucking job. That's what I do. A while ago, I had a voiceover guy fuck me out of my hard-earned money. Bounced a bunch of checks on me. I ended up almost $4,000 in the hole. Guess what? You want to know how I solved that problem? I applied for a job at UPS. I worked as a warehouse package handler, and within 5 weeks, I paid the fucking debt off. And yes, I had a little bit of help from my family, but most of the work I did myself. I don't have to beg fans for fucking money. Yes, here on the Boochcast, we do ask for donations, but they're respectful requests. Whether you donate or not, we still put out a show for you. We're just saying anybody that wants to help us grow, there's your opportunity. But I'm not begging, I'm not pleading, I'm not panhandling. And I sure as hell am not scamming motherfuckers. And the first red flag I noticed was one time I'm on Twitter and I see Buff going, Buff Daddy's looking to get into deathmatch wrestling. And I'm thinking, since when? Because I don't remember Buff telling me that.
I remember that right there. I remember that very fucking well. I was like, oh, you were talking, he wants to do a death match. Like, wait, what?
So I called Buff up.
I was like, no fucking way. No, Buff, he would not do a death match. Maybe a hardcore, but death match? No.
So I called Buff up, naturally, right? I said, hey, I'm seeing this Twitter stuff. You're doing a death match. Is that true? It turns out Michael did talk to Buff about doing death matches and somehow convinced Buff that being a deathmatch guy is a good fucking idea. Because Michael Long is one of those deathmatch marks that you fucking see on TV that believes in the deathmatch wrestling and, you know, all the blood and the light tubes and Nick fucking Gage, man. So Michael's into all that dumb fucking shit. And all the shit the marks buy into, he buys into. But Buff told me that's what they were doing. So I'm like, okay. So I'm assuming Michael, with all his tweets, is running things by Buff. But what really set things off was when Michael started doing the big mistake. And this is the thing that I said. And I said this in the social media video that I made. I even said this when I talked about this Michael Long thing on the Getting Back to Being the Booch episode of our podcast. I said this. The trick to being a great social media manager is you post stuff that the client believes in, not what you believe in. So because Michael Long is not only a deathmatch mark, but he's an LGBTQ fucking libtard. He's a leftist jackass. And by the way, I also will mention a fucking child molester, as you see from the picture. In fact, here's the picture again. Just in case you need another reminder, he starts posting LGBT shit all over Buff's Twitter. And because of that, people started thinking that Buff was this massive LGBT supporter. Now, here's the thing. Buff Bagwell does support the LGBT community, but he's not an ally of the community. Now, some of you are thinking, what's the difference? Here's the difference. A supporter is someone who supports your right to be who you are. That's the difference. If you're gay, we support that. If you're a lesbian, we support that. If you're bisexual, we support that. If you're trans, we support that. As long as you're an adult. If you're a grown adult making grown adult decisions about your sex life, go ahead.
What goes on in other people's bedroom is none of our business.
Exactly. That's a supporter. An ally is someone who will tweet stuff and join you in protests or ride with you in the Pride Parade. Buff's not doing any of that. He's a supporter, but he's not to a massive Jedi level, nor should he be. No one's required to be an extreme supporter of something. You can just simply respect someone's right to be who they are. And that's all we're required to do, is respect it. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to die for it. If you want to make that choice, go ahead. But it's not a requirement. But he started posting all this extreme stuff. And here's another thing about social media people don't understand. You can have 100,000 followers, but if you have a business like Buff does, and you're not able to convert those followers into clients, then really that number is just a number. It's like a Nerf vibrator. It's nice to look at, but it doesn't fucking do anything for you. Because how many of these people that were following the page were buying DVDs, buying 8x10s off the website, buying tickets to see Buff? How many of them were at conventions or wrestling events talking to us? You know how many I met that were LGBT? Maybe 2. One of them we saw at the show in Dallas when we were live on pay-per-view. He was a super nice guy. I'm not saying anything bad about him. Wonderful human being. He was gay. He loved the fact that Buff had the LGBT stuff on there. Couldn't have been a nicer guy. He was just a proud gay man who liked seeing the tweets. And we're glad he did. But they weren't the right tweets for that page because that's not what Buff would tweet. And he would also tweet stuff about indie wrestlers that Buff has never heard of, but creating the illusion that Buff knows who these guys are, or sharing his thoughts on AEW Dynamite, even though they might not be the opinions that Buff had. Because again, you're supposed to think like your client. Like, for example, I'll use an example. I had a client once at my job who was a doctor. He was a big supporter of the COVID vaccine. He also felt the Moderna vaccine was the best one to get. Now, is it the best one? I don't know. I didn't get vaccinated. I didn't believe in this COVID vaccine. I thought it was a joke. But when I was on his page, what do you think I posted? Get the Moderna vaccine. Because that's what he believed. And it's about his beliefs, not mine. Why? Because it's his fucking page. It's not my page. On my personal page, I can post whatever the fuck I damn well please. But if I'm managing a client, I have to post what my client believes. Because that's how you properly run a fucking page. And this guy abused my trust. He abused Buff's trust. And in the process, a bunch of fans got fucked over. And we got fucked over. Because we had to be the ones that had to clean up the fucking mess. And some of the messes we were able to clean up. And some of them we weren't. But ultimately, Michael Long, Javon Miller, he is to blame. That's the guy who took your money. So if there's anybody out there that's still angry and bitter and pissed off over the whole incident that went down a few years back, Michael Long, Javon Michael Miller is the one you want to unleash your venom on. Because he's the one who fucked you. Buff didn't fuck you. I didn't fuck you. And I will be goddamned if I'm going to let this, I'm going to say it one more time, this kitty-touching faggot drag my name through the mud. When I've never fucked anybody over a day in my life that didn't have it coming to them. And obviously, the Buff Daddy fans didn't have it coming to them because they were loyal-ass fans. I would never fuck over those fans. Someone who supports Buff, someone who supports me, I would never do wrong by them. I don't have to fuck people over to make money. I can go get a job and make fucking money. Because that's what I do. That's who I am. That's what I'm about. I do right by those that do right by me. I take care of people who take care of me. And the fact that this happened is fucking ridiculous. And the fact that somebody out there would actually do this, not only to Buff, but to fans, to me is downright sickening. So yeah, that's what went down. This guy manipulated us with a podcast, and in the process, fucked over a ton of people. This is a guy who fucked over fans by taking their money. He also took advantage of people by setting up GoFundMe pages, by lying about having dementia or cancer. Not only that, he tried to set up a Judy Bagwell funeral fund when Judy died, and he embezzled the money from that. So yeah, we have legit reasons to hate this motherfucker. He's one of those guys, if I ever saw him in public, I'd probably fucking beat him to death. Because the biggest tragedy in the world is that he still draws breath. And I'm not even scared if I get in trouble for saying that or doing that. What's the worst thing that can happen? I'm going to go to prison? All they have to do is ask me, what are you in for? I beat up a child molester. They'll welcome me with open fucking arms. I'll get to cut in line, at the chow line. They'll spot me at the bench press. I'll get to sleep on the top bunk. I ain't fucking scared. I don't know. Is there anything else I need to say?
I think you said it all.
All right. But yeah, I just want to get that Michael Long shit off my chest because
He's been waiting to do this a long time.
yeah, he embezzled money and fucked a lot of people over.
Let's hope he suffers in hell where he belongs.
Exactly. And now that I got that off my chest and I said what I need to say there, I guess we'll wrap up this episode of Boochcast Reviews, Darkside of the Ring. Zach, thanks for joining me for this one, man. I appreciate it. And tune in next week. We're going to have a good show. I will be joined by the one and only Gator Ricky Ross, as we'll be diving into a guy who is known for being a total badass in the world of professional wrestling. And of course, we'll be talking about Terry Gordy, the final flight of the Freebird. Next week here on the Boochcast. So make sure you guys follow us on all of our podcast platforms. The link is down in the description box below. Follow us on our social media platforms. The link is down in the description box below. You can also support the Boochcast by going to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Boochcast/support. That link will be in the description box below. And of course, as always, hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified so you never miss another episode of Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring, as well as other additional Boochcast YouTube content. We'll talk to you guys next time. Until then, pizza, baby!